Star fam? Welcome to this official Star Stable interview with the wonderful Leila, DM Leila, who has very honorably joined me today for this. Honorably was not the right word I was looking for. We're already off to a great start. This is a dev interview, a development interview about like what goes on behind the scenes for Star Stable and like a lot of more tech questions that the community hasn't ever really been able to ask, and I'm really looking forward to doing it. I'm going to go over a couple things before we jump into it. First of all, I have I would say a moderate video game tech industry vocab, and Leila has a very robust one being in the industry, and we are going to carry on conversations trying to flow for us. We don't want to like stop and define things every 5 minutes for y'all. But I will be editing back in blurbs at the bottom about different tech terms that most folks may not be familiar with. So if there's something you're not familiar with, it should be showing up at the bottom of the screen. And we'll go over like things like transaction and positive feedback loops and monetization things and all that technical jargon that probably a lot of fans don't have, but we don't want to spend a lot of time defining it. Other than that, I just want to point out that even though Leila is here and she's gotten permission from Star Stable to be here, there are still topics that for the security of the company and for the protection of their IPs, we're not going to be talking about certain things just because that's Star Stable's business, and I'm not here. I'm here to ask questions, but I don't want to put Leila in any risk. She's already here very kindly to talk to the community like this, but we also want to respect Star Stable and as a business and as a company to keep all of that private and protected. And so if there's ever like a cut or an edit, then we maybe talked about something that Star Stable's like, hey, no, we don't want that out just yet. So that is why this was not done live for all of you. And that's why some topics may not get brought up, just because we're trying to be respectful to the company as a company. The company as a company is a great sentence. All right. I think that is all of my disclosures out of the way. So Leila, would you like to introduce yourself for the community?
Yes, thank you for that introduction. I am the not right honorably Game Master Leila, also known as Sorceress Farley on most of the social media I frequent. And I work as a game designer on Star Stable Online.
And I have a general idea of what a game designer is. And I know we just said we're not going to do a bunch of definitions, but this one I think is kind of important. Game designer. Game designer is kind of a harder to pin down kind of term, because like if I say I'm a concept artist or I'm a 3D modeler, that's a very obvious job description. So could you explain a little what a game designer does in game?
Yes, exactly. A game designer is a bit harder to nail down, but there's of course also several parts of being a game designer, like how a 3D modeler can be a character artist or a prop artist or a landscape modeler. There are several branches of game design, like level design, quest design, narrative design. But generally, game design is all about setting the experience for the player. It's a lot of work with numbers and Excel sheets in practice, but it might be the part where people are closest to imagining what working on a game would be like. It's a bit too much to say that designers decide what's going to happen, but it's more like we set the direction of how it is going to happen. So in Star Stable, this of course means that we most often create the things that you do in the game, such as quests and races and championships and other activities.
So could you say that a game designer is kind of like a ship captain? They can handle like most things on task, but they need their whole crew to...
Yes, but... also, I think a colleague of mine used a great analogy as a movie director, which I also think is a very apt description. That you have all these, you sort of have these all puzzle pieces. You get the art from the artists, you get the code from the programmers after you've described, I need this exactly to make something work. And then you're usually the one who's responsible of putting it all together. But as a game designer, it's also important that you yourself have a high level of understanding of all the other disciplines, because they're people that you need to work together with. You might not need to know exactly how to make a beautiful 3D model, but you should probably know some of the terms, so you can discuss things with artists for a fair understanding, and at least be able to use programming tools to put together your own prototypes to demonstrate how something would look with its bare basics.
I think that covered everything for the intro. So moving on, we were going to talk about things going on in current development based on things that are in-game kind of questions to it. And I will try to rephrase some of these questions because I write in a very, I don't want to sound passive-aggressive with these questions. So I will try to make it sound less, I don't know, nana boo-boo. That, I don't know how to put that. Like, why didn't you think of this kind of way? I don't want it to come off that way, but like, I don't know. So I've run a poll for about a year-ish now, and it's got a couple hundred entries now. About 70% of Star Stable's player base wants to see all of the horse models brought up to their most recent gen version. So like all the Morgans brought up to the most recent Morgan gen, or all of the English Thoroughbreds, the most recent English Thoroughbred model. And even through things Star Stable has put out, have said that having the old assets makes it difficult for development, to the point that development around those models have been cut off at this. Considering that there's such a large percentage of the community that really wants some kind of way to either pay to update the models to the recent version or just flat update them all, what is Star Stable's thought process in keeping those old models in?
That's certainly a great question. I'm just going to put this on a side that when it comes to survey numbers, it's very difficult to say if a certain sample size represents the whole community, but it's a very valid question. Just for any viewer, in any survey, it's possible that people could not have seen it, or they would use different people are in different places. I think this is a bit of an aside, because I think all your questions from the survey is valid. I just don't want people to take them as absolute numbers in the future, because that could be bad for the statistics I have that I'm not totally allowed to share. So I'm a bit in a weird place on that. But to return to your question, we have a lot of horses in the game that have been in the game since the very start. And a lot of people still own those models, and those models are still on the horse market able to be bought. But there's, as you say, there's not a lot of real value for players to buy the old models because they're outdated. We do want to I can't say for sure that how we want to use it, but we do want to phase out all of the old models in the game eventually. We did an experiment on that for the Fjord horse, which was related to the longer grinding to just be allowed to buy it in Dino Valley. And there were some negative reaction around it, but generally the sentiment right now, there aren't still people complaining that the old Fjord horses are gone for the game. So eventually we might try to do the same with all the old horse models, at least as a first step, making sure that people can't buy the old ones when there are new ones available. For instance, I think that the old Akoteki you can still buy at the horse market, and a lot of old horses are like that, right? Yeah,
I think the Fjord is the only one that's been taken out, the old Fjord. Yeah. So the rest of them are still in and all at the horse market, as far as I'm aware.
And I think it would also be a great solution. It's not something that we can really implement right now because it will require new tech. But personally, I think it would be a good solution to have some sort of option to upgrade for legacy players who have old models. Of course, the value of buying an item in an economy is always going to be the price you pay at that very moment. And that means that if an old player bought an old horse at 2011, at that point that horse might have been cool, and they got enjoyment of using that for several years until the new model came out. I don't think new horse models undermines the experience you had back then. But it's a good balancing question, right? Like, would it be worth to upgrade old models compared to just hoping that everyone will buy the new model.
Yeah.
It's something that we've definitely discussed, and that would be something that would be very interesting to have the whole community's reaction on as well. I mean, you can never get the whole community, but...
Yeah, but like any polls I do, polls from my community, and my community has similar opinions to mine, so I know that the polls I pull are skewed, so I would definitely be interested in Star Stable pulling that from their main community.
Yeah, and I think as far as at least Tumblr, can I mention social media in this interview?
I guess I don't see why not.
As far as the Tumblr community goes, it's a bit smaller than our communities in other places. I think, at least when you look at like average number of posts per day and stuff like that. But that can be for a variety of reasons. But considering that the community is smaller, the sample size of your survey of that community probably is very accurate.
But that's still just a microcosm of the entire Star Stable community. So that's definitely, they have their opinions, which will be different from like the Instagram community, which will be different from the YouTube community.
Yeah, exactly. Like depending on if someone, sometimes when we do surveys, we can see that there are very different answers depending on if someone answered from Facebook or Instagram. And in general, what we've seen is that the age groups are probably very different on that. I can't go into it too much, obviously, but there's definitely part of that.
Okay. Going back to the horse topic, because you were talking about like the balancing issues, since the old models can no longer interact with new tech, is there any concern that when Star Stable eventually adds new stat sets, that buying a new horse would become, in a way, pay to win, because you have to buy the usually more Starcoin newer model than buying the now price dropping older models. So it becomes kind of I know the competition scene in Star Stable isn't like incredibly competitive, but there's still kind of this angle of like you have to buy this 800, 900 Starcoin horse in order to be competitive in SSO. Is that a concern that's going into the debate on the old model update kind of question?
I think that with the overall design philosophy of the game, we will never let the game become pay to win, in the sense that if we release some new fancy equipment and we say, here's a new saddle, this one gives +10 to speed, that's probably not how we're going to use that when we remake them, but just for the context of what we have now, then you will, regarding the design philosophy of the game now, you will definitely always, at the very least, be able to use these items on your starter horse.
Okay.
And we're, as far as I can say right now, we are not planning to make any horses that have any advantage in races over any other horses.
Okay.
So we're not looking to make the game pay to win in that sense, at the very least. That even if you have an old horse that might not be able to use new tech, hopefully the old tech will have been updated to include the new stat set, but otherwise you should always be able to rely on your starter horse. Okay.
That's definitely something, because the starter horse doesn't have any stats, and so arguably doesn't a horse you use star coins to get mean you would have an advantage in a race? Is that something? Why is it that the starter then does not have any stats to make it?
Well, none of the horses have any pluses in the speed stat in particular, and that is really the stat that matters. That matters in racing.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I think we'll get to discuss the stats in more detail later on in this interview as well, because I think we both have some strong opinions on the current usage of stats.
Very much so.
But the idea of the game is that no horse should really be a purchase as an advantage over another horse. And if we ever introduce new equipment or new horses, they shouldn't necessarily be better than that everyone should be able to at least play and enjoy the game.
For sure.
On an equal level. We even had that. We had a thing with them. I think it was the American quarter horse, the old one, which was bugged for a long time. So its jump actually was. I think its frames were sped up in its jump, so it was a lot shorter than any other horse.
Oh.
And that bug was just present for years. But it was a bug. But it's one of those things that when a bug is present too long in a game, do you even dare to fix it? And then a few months ago, we fixed it. And a lot of people didn't like that because they feel like we suddenly nerfed the American quarter horse into uselessness. And no, we didn't. We just brought it down to the same level as all the other horses. And at the same time, a while ago, we brought up the ponies to the same level as all the other horses, as well as the magical horses, I believe.
Yep, they were between.
So now we can confidently say that the target is that whichever horse you choose to buy, you should be able to use it in any racing activity without feeling like you have an unfair advantage.
That is definitely good to hear, because too many MMOs, that's always an issue, and it's definitely something I am interested in watching as Star Stable hopefully develops more of its competitive scene, because that's such a good end game kind of content.
It would definitely be interesting to develop that part more, especially concerning things like riding clubs. Could be made a lot of interesting things, but I think that might also be something we get to later on.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you brought up the American quarter horse, because when it launched, it had a speed bug. It went as fast as a fully trained horse at like level 1 and 2, and that was a whole debacle. And the PR team said there wasn't a bug, and that was a huge issue when it released. So it is obviously fixed now.
I think that was at the time when the chosen direction was to say there is no war in buzzings. I mean, there are no bugs in Star Stable Online.
Well, I'm very glad to see that change. Because the honesty,
I've heard that once upon a time that was a strategy, but that is not something we want to do anymore.
I am definitely glad to hear that, because that definitely, and we'll get to this, but it definitely added a lot to, I think, the division in the community of the Star Stable can do no wrong versus the let's actually talk about Star Stable's flaws kind of thing. So I'm definitely glad, as this interview demonstrates, that Star Stable is willing to talk about its strengths and its weaknesses, because I think that makes it open to grow a lot more than if we only talk about its strengths. That said, I've picked your brain about pretty much all of my questions on the old models. So, but talking on the line of, like, you brought up the economy. Wow, I can't speak. The economy being something Star Stable is looking at. Star Stable's economy is kind of stagnant. It's not player interactable, and while that arguably cuts down on Star Stable being able to have player inflation because there's no trading, that also means that the shillings in the game, Jorvik shillings, value kind of fluctuates. What is the philosophy on balancing the worth of shillings versus star coins as the game is getting developed?
Well, you pointed out really well there that your shillings, they do, while we have them locked down to no player trading, they still have a fair amount of problems on their own, because everything in the game can be bought with star coins. So there's very little real value for Jorvik shilling, and the fact that Jorvik shilling also has a cap at 10,000 is something that can work as both a blessing and a curse in both direction, I think. All of that is there to really, I think all of that is it was put there in the beginning to protect against inflation, because of course you can find a lot of horror stories online about MMOs that really didn't think through their economy, and players managed to kill it within for a few months because they started trading cats as a primary currency or something. When it comes to trading between players in particular, it's also a bit difficult to do in Star Stable, considering so far in the game, mostly every player has been able to get every item. Which means that there isn't really any incentive to trade anything. Like, we don't have any classes or very little random drops or things like that.
Mhm.
And if there is a random drop, it's probably something like horse food and not a +10 armor of awesomeness.
like at most it would be something like maybe like festival outfits that someone didn't get access to would be, I think, the most that people might want to trade, because like
Exactly.
particularly the birthday stuff, because like I have year one Star Stable birthday gear that no one else has access to now. I think that would be at most the prestige items for trading in Star Stable, but there isn't. You can only have one of any given shirt in your account unless it's from a random drop.
Yeah, and I guess there could be some incentive to trading quest gear for horses, since you can only do a quest once and get reward once, but you might want to use it on several horses.
Mm-hmm.
But in that case, I think we'd rather want to solve that problem in some other way, like creating a shop where you can buy several copies of something that you get in a quest, or a buyback shop I know is highly requested.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something that you could do solely with Jorvik Shilling. But the fact that there is a cap on Jorvik Shilling means that a lot of the items, generally, we try to keep the conversion between star coins and Jorvik Shilling, at least nowadays, about 100 shilling to the star coin.
Okay.
But this, of course, creates some trouble when star coin items might be priced over 100 star coins and there is a cap. So you suddenly have most of the items you can buy with Jorvik Shilling is like 8,000, 9,000 Jorvik Shilling. And then it's more like you play until you hit the window that says you have maxed out your Jorvik Shilling. Then you go buy one item and that's it. And that's not a very satisfying way of doing it, I think. But at the same time, if we remove the 10,000 cap, I think a lot of people really want that because they think then they could get a lot more money for these items. But the result of that would also be that we would start releasing items that would cost more than 10,000 Jorvik Shilling. So just raising the cap, I think, wouldn't necessarily solve the problem unless there is a real thought in the economy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there aren't any decisive plans of how we're going to treat the economy. But I think I'm allowed to say that we got a new economy designer online at the beginning of this year. Online.
Very exciting.
I mean, on the team. Online. We didn't create a robot. Like you're an economy designer now. That would be bad. No, but we got an economy designer who is experienced with MMO economies. Mm-hmm. He just started in the beginning of the year, and he has started by just gathering information and looking at the game. And hopefully it's going to be a first step to figure out how we're going to do things with the economy. Our previous economy designer did lay out a lot of groundwork with gathering information, but he left about a year ago. So we've been looking for someone to fill that role since.
Well, I'm glad it sounds like that you have it filled. Unfortunately, that means I think the rest of my questions, if it's still groundwork research stage, I don't think I can ask like whether or not Shilling to Jorvik Shilling to Starcoin kind of converter. Those kinds of questions are probably off the table right now. If it's still,
yeah, I don't think I don't think there is there's much I can say about it, but we will simply have to see. Mm-hmm. But I do think that considering that horses are kind of the only main core loop in the game at the moment, like you buy a horse, you train it, or rather you wait 8 weeks for the allowance to get the horse, and then you train it to level 15. Since horses are so part of core loop of the game, I think maybe not Jorvik Shilling in particular, but I think there is a chance that we will add horses to the game that you will be able to get without using star coins, but it would probably involve some sort of very long-term grinding gameplay,
or like a different currency, like some games do like dungeon currency kind of thing, like do
yes, perhaps
prestige achievements to unlock a horse. All right, that's
like something like race prestige could be cool as well. Like every
go.
time you finish a race and like you get those medals, right? That don't really do anything other than bragging rights at the moment. But what if, depending on which level you finished on, you get some prestige coins and you get that for every race each day, and you can exchange that for cool items in some shop, or like maybe buy prestige for your writing guild. Or now my designer brain is running away here with ideas, but it's also something to watch out for, because when it comes to adding currencies, because I know a lot of I'm looking at a lot of mobile games in particular that tends to get a currency bloat, because every time they introduce a new mechanic, they don't want players who have grinding a lot and saved up a particular currency to just be able to buy everything in that mode. So they introduce basically a new currency every time they introduce some mode, and like I play some games that have 20 different currencies easily, and it's really weird, and that's I think that level of complexity is something we'd like to avoid as well.
That's fair. I think that would definitely, though, if there's just like there's a racing currency, that would add some depth to competitive modes, and having like championship leagues and stuff like that would make an actual interesting reason to not just compete in championships for the chance to win a ribbon and 50 shillings, but also like there are actual leaderboards for it. I think would be really interesting to engage with the community, and there's an incentive there to do that and to get people to participate. So I'm excited to see what y'all come up with. That's really exciting to see how that's going to move. So.
Yeah, but it's definitely very exciting to see, because a lot of things have started happening, and they're going to continue to happen with the game. So I am very excited to see where it will go. Of course, again, I want to highlight, just for, in particular, if I have a lot of younger viewers, that anything I say is not a promise. I'm not saying anything will happen. It's mostly just speculation and clearing things up from someone who is working on the game.
Yeah, this is all just work in progress. Nothing is official yet. With money questions out of the way, I guess this kind of works in the same. We've been talking about progression and like satisfying gameplay loops, and I know you can't go into the whys, but Star Stable has stopped doing leveling and increasing stat numbers. And we've talked about, and I'm biased because you sent this post I made on this topic to your team about mastery levels or prestige levels. What is Star Stable considering to move away from traditional leveling into the prestige levels? What is that thought process looking like design wise for Star Stable?
So we have discussed a variety of different solutions, and I always find it interesting when someone in the community who has a bit more involvement with the ideas in game design, like yourself, creates something like, here's a suggestion on how leveling could work with Star Stable, because I love sharing those things with the team. In general, I love sharing things with the team that our community comes up with, but it's so rare that it's actual game design stuff. It's usually art or stories or things like that. But yeah, we of course I can't say what we are deciding on doing right now, and to be honest, it's still very much on the experimental stage. But there are some problems with leveling right now. Like, your leveling is hard locked to quests. So, and we've removed the recurring XP quests from most yearly events, like the old Christmas and the old Midsummer had all those quests that you could grind every year. And thus someone who had played the game for 7 years would always be at a higher level than someone who started playing, because there would simply be XP they couldn't get anymore. And that's not really a good way for a game to operate. And we're not offering any further incentive at the moment for people to grind levels. And additionally, leveling up doesn't really... I don't know about what the community thinks, but it's really lacking some punch in the fact that there's not much that happens when you level up.
And I feel like that's definitely a sentiment for high-level players like myself, because a lot of the areas are releasing at lower levels, that once you get to level 16 and you get Epona, it's like, well, what's the point of leveling up? There's no reward or incentive to keep going. And I've known people who stopped the grind because they're like, there's no point. Star Staple's not going to release anything at over level 16 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. There is the fact that there is no incentive to actually grind for levels, but there's also the fact that you don't grind for levels in Star Stable because you just get them automatically as you play quests. And I think it would be more interesting if the levels or some way of using experience was something that you could grind in some sort of more indefinite kind of system. That would probably require a rebuild, because right now you get a flat speed boost every time you level up. That speed boost is also kind of small from level to level, but you notice a clear difference between level 1 and level 18, for example. But when you level up from level 12 to level 13, you barely notice that you got faster, and it doesn't feel good for the player. Like, leveling up should be this big celebration. You should probably have some agency in how you want to shape your character or your life in Jorvik.
Yeah.
And you should be given interesting options. And of course, if there's leveled unlocks, then something should probably also tell you what you can unlock this level. Like, if you gain level 16, you're now eligible to unlock Epona.
Yeah.
It's but I think in general, since Star Stable's leveling system looked a lot at World of Warcraft, but there is no combat in Star Stable, leveling becomes kind of moot. So I really like the idea of having some sort of skill tree instead, or leveling where you can make a choice how you want to build your character, and then you could have a similar thing for your horse, where your character could probably be built in a variety of ways that would support something, while if you're building a horse, you might build it for a specific purpose. Like, I want this to be a great show jumping horse, or I want this to be a horse that is great at running in terrain. And that would also make buying each new horse an adventure of its own, because you could set a purpose for it, you could build it, we would hopefully add a lot more options to the horse, so you can create your own story every time you buy a horse, because that's, to relate back a bit to the previous question, we think that buying a horse should be, if that is something that should provide so much value to the player, it should actually be an experience every time. Racing your starter horse should be an experience. Racing a new horse you bought should be an experience.
And I think that definitely adds, because I've seen so many people who, like, they want horse personalities, and I know we've talked about how, like, there's some limitations with the animations already with horses and giving them personality, but, like, stat-wise giving them a personality, I've noticed, like, even if I've had two characters who look the same, at least for myself, having a horse, or having a character with different stats can give them entirely different personalities, even if, like, they have the same voice actor, or if they have the same animations. If it feels different to play that character, I can develop a different idea in my head. And so, like, even just from a stat level, I think that would be a really interesting base for like a personality system for horses that a lot of players seem to really want.
Yeah, and I think that those systems could probably work really well with each other as well. So, like, the stats and the skills could complement the animations of a horse to really get you feel that, okay, this horse I bought is a real person. Like, you have that with... I'm not personally very experienced with horses, but both with cats and dogs, you notice that as a pet owner in real life, your pets have personalities.
For sure. I've developed a whole D&D supplement on that topic.
Yes.
And it's definitely interesting to see. But the thing we keep dancing around, and I guess to transition to the next question, is we've talking about how Star Stable's stat system to do a point system like that and to make it satisfying. Star Stable's current stat system is not necessarily an incentive because you already said it. Like the only stat you need is the speed stats because that's what racing right now is built around. What is going on around that? Because I'm sure there's some holdovers from like the CD-ROM games because it's almost like it feels like a lot of Star Stable is a direct port. What is going on with the stat system and what are the thoughts on improving it?
It's sort of difficult for me to answer all of the thoughts that went into the beginning of the game. I worked on this game for about 3 years now. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot of things, since the game is 8 years old and development, of course, started before the game was released. A lot of the early decisions are still a bit shrouded in mystery. Maybe there was some, like it often is in game design, that maybe there was some sort of intention for something to work in a certain way, but for various reasons that never came to pass, or it had to be cut and it was never re-added. But yeah, I think we can say that just having one stat, which is just the best stat, is not necessarily the way to go. Especially if you want your players to make interesting decisions. And I can't say when it will happen or how exactly it will happen. But if it was up to me, I would probably just remove the entire stat system as it is right now. We are not going to do this. Let me just emphasize, we're not going to remove all stats. But that would at least let every player use whatever clothes they wanted. Because one set of clothes wouldn't be better than another until we add a new stat system. But that is not something we're going to do. Okay. But eventually, I think we will need to redo the stat system from the ground. Okay. And what is going to happen then, I can't say for certain. I can't even say if items and item levels will be connected to the stat system. But right now, like items and levels also matters into this a bit, because we discussed before how leveling is not very strong. And once you get to level 9 right now, you have access to all the items with max stats. And there's no item that has more stats than anything you can buy at level 9. Yeah. And that also makes it less of an incentive to buy any item with a item level less than level 9, because that item will not have max stats, or maybe in case of a lot of our event clothes, will have 0 stats. Yeah.
And I know the event clothes having no stats has been something that's come up a lot as a complaint, at least from the parts of the community I've been. I guess
that has happened.
My comment then would be, if Star Stable is looking at already like redoing the connection between stats and clothing, would like some kind of transmog or glamour system, like in Final Fantasy or WoW or Guild Wars 2, be something that would be considered to bring over, so like you can just get the no stat event gear, but then you can go to like, I forgot what they changed his name to, but the tailor in Silverglade, and you can like, all right, here's...
Oh yeah, he's not Donald the tailor anymore. He's Daxton the tailor
Daxton, now. There it is. Daxton the tailor, like bring him 50 shillings or 50 star coins and the gear you want for the appearance and the gear you want for the stats. And that would then, I think, be a good, going back to the economy point, hypothetically be a good money sink to loop that back around. Like, you have to go pay to upgrade your gear.
Yeah, I agree. I think that considering that we feel that self-expression is a big part of Star Stable, at least being able to use all these items that we're giving away, because I think we have more cosmetic items than most MMOs out there. We need some sort of system that could actually emphasize allowing you to wear these beautiful clothes we make to give away at events, but because we want to even level 1 players to be able to obtain them, we're putting them at level 1 or level 0, which means no stats. And then most players don't want to use these great looking clothes because they don't have stats. So that's something where we have talked a lot about this, and we are definitely at some point going to implement some system that will allow players to use the clothes they want to and still preserve stats. I don't know if it's going to be a glamour system, or if you allow the tailor to upgrade the item level, or some kind of crafting system where you can merge two clothes. But something like that is definitely a mechanic we're interested in putting into place at some point.
Awesome. That is
but of course, every time I say that this is something we want to put into place, there's always the question of prioritization. Even if we know the thing we want to do, I can't even promise that it's something that will be done this year, because it can be any number of questions of priorities, or what do we feel that the game needs right now, or someone from marketing has discovered that it's very important that we do a campaign focused on a certain thing, and we have I can't promise when anything will come out, but it's definitely something I can say that we've talked a lot about.
For sure. And that's, I think all of the fashion writers in the community will be happy to hear that, because then they can look great and race great.
I think all the riding clubs that have uniforms would be delighted to hear that they could actually build their uniform without considering, this will actually make our horses slower.
Yeah, no, that's exciting to hear. I am excited because we've talked about loops in Star Stable and making like rewarding loops. I've asked you this question because, again, in polls I've run, the least favorite of activities in Star Stable is the hens, fishing, and archaeology. And it would seem that if something is so much disliked, that it should be patched, or it should be updated if no one likes it. And it has seemed, at least to me, that in some ways, in adding the achievements to like go catch this many fish or go catch the hens, it's been kind of like, we know you don't like it, but we're not changing it. What is going on with those, and what are Star Stable's thoughts on keeping those systems as is?
Those achievements, I'm wondering, that was partly me being sadistic about things, and partly honestly, it was we were making the achievement system as a test run for some things, and we needed suggestions on what you could actually do in the game. And the fishing and archaeology is really the only free-form activities we have that aren't related to most other things in the game.
Yeah.
And then I said, if we have fishing, we might as well add the Sunfield Hunt. I meant it as a joke, but then we did that anyway. And then you can blame one particular person from the Tumblr community for saying that I should never add a star that acts like a Sunfield chicken. So I did. But to answer this more seriously, and not just joking on how awful those chickens are to catch, fishing is something I enjoy a lot in other games than Star Stable.
Same.
I think it's an activity that can incentivize those points that just are enjoyable about games. Like, fishing can be an activity where you take a complete break from the main game and you just do something else for a while as a little relaxing activity. And despite having very different fishing system, I have enjoyed fishing in both games like the Zelda series, both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, and even old Link's Awakening. I guess also the remake, haven't played that one yet, had very fun fishing systems. And Stardew Valley has a fun fishing system. There are a lot of games that do fishing, or even in World of Warcraft, even if that is not a very there's not much gameplay connected to it, but a lot of people sometimes like just sitting around chatting and fishing. So then we gotta ask ourselves, what are the problems with fishing in Star Stable? And I think there are a lot of problems that could be easily fixed if we prioritize them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the first thing, which I think is the main glaring issue, is that it has a random chance of failure.
Mm-hmm.
You can do everything correct and you get a message, good work, but the fish got away
Good
anyway.
work, yeah. You missed anyway. Nothing you could have done.
Yeah. And you never want to do that. Like, what if in another game, if you do something perfectly and there is a random chance that you miss, that's not going to feel good, especially if you're not sure what you're doing, so you can still think that you're doing something wrong, even though you're doing everything right.
Yeah.
So my first step to fixing phishing would be to remove that, to at least make what we have in the game now slightly more bearable with just a tiny change.
Mm-hmm.
But to actually make it fun, I think phishing needs to be expanded to be something else than just connected to a blue quest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it needs to be a lot more freeform. And I think it will need to use some loot tables.
So something more like how archaeology works right now.
Yeah, I would imagine that instead of having people that give you a quest and that allows you to go fish, you should just have a bunch of locations in Jorvik where you can throw out your line and fish at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And every place you fish at could have a random chance of like, yeah, here you can catch chub and perch and herring. And there's also a random chance of getting trash or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sell all these fishes for Jorvik Shillings in the shop. You could also add a collection for that, or maybe donate them to a museum where you can see them swimming around in tanks, like in Animal Crossing. I do love those games. But then you also remake those quests that the fishermen are giving out to be, today they want you to fish up 5 salmon, but it's up to you to find those locations where you know, all right, here is salmon.
Mm-hmm.
And then fish at them, get 5, and if you get a bunch of other fish, you can just sell those for Jorvik Shillings, so you still earn something from it.
I think the Animal Crossing reference is really important because I think that would add a purpose to doing archaeology again, particularly because a lot of people will do archaeology either for just the equipment set or just for the rep. And then they won't do it anymore for the most part. But should be a good income source if you're gonna keep doing it. But then also being able to like go to Jorvik City and go to the museum and be like, yeah, I donated that. It's a physical trophy you can see and how you impacted the world. And that
that was sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say that feels. Games that do that make it feel like a bigger trophy than sometimes like, I checked it off in my achievements box. You actually
I think it's so amazing in Animal Crossing. When you walk into the museum, you can just walk around and look at all the dinosaur skeletons you've collected, look at all the fish you've caught. Mm-hmm. And that was when we built the system for collections a while back, that was also a big point I had in consideration, that is something we should be able to do. Okay. And that is actually technically something we would be able to do today, but of course then some 3D artist would have to model all those dinosaurs so you could walk around and look at them properly. Because I always had that in mind, because we have this museum in Jorvik City which has been closed and under renovation. You only really visit it in one quest. But wouldn't it be cool if you could like have these big collections, or we do like a butterfly catching minigame and you can walk into a room full of butterflies.
Oh, that'd be so pretty.
I think that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And with fishing, you could also add other randomized rewards, like maybe there's random treasure at the bottom of the sea that you can get as well.
Find Garnock artifacts under the ocean.
That way we have the games now. You find most of the artifacts by doing archaeology, but suddenly when you're fishing, here's an artifact that I can donate to the museum that I got by doing another activity. Cool. And then the player, I think those kind of systems tend to make the world feel more holistic. Mm-hmm. Is holistic a word we should be explaining?
I can put it down below, but it feels more fleshed out, easier to jump into. I guess. I don't know. How would you like to define holistic?
the great all that binds things together. I believe Dirk gently put it. No, a holistic one in game, really. When it comes to games, at least, I say it has to do with the world feeling like a real place where things are connected and things don't just exist for the sake of existing in a game. And that things react naturally to the world, like the fact that we've started to put NPCs who can chat with you at celebrations because, hey, it's a celebration. Of course you'll see folks around all of Jorvik coming to these things.
And I particularly like walking through town because sometimes I'll turn off the character name and I'll just see NPCs talking, and it even though I know like a lot of the people are players, it's cool to walk through and see like the bobcat saying hello to me or something like that. That feels feels more populated than the fight going on in chat.
Yeah. And I didn't really touch on the Sunfield hands here, but I think that's really a task I wouldn't change. Maybe remove the achievement for it. I think we should change it to make the chickens feel less random. They are actually a thing that isn't as random as it feels, but there's no way for the players to see that. And it's such a small game that I think something like fishing and archaeology would have a much higher impact if they were updated the proper system, while the Sunfield Chickens is just some mini game. I think.
Oh, I was just going to say, if it nothing else, we had talked about it being a good ground to implement a universal interact key.
Yes, definitely. There should be. There should be just press E or Enter or something on your keyboard to interact with the thing in front of you. That's such a huge accessibility issue right now.
Definitely would love to see it, but I understand that if it's like one quest, that's not one daily quest. It's not necessarily a priority to get that fixed when you have everything else as big core loops.
I think the main problem with the Sunfield Chickens is that they are currently one of very few ways to grind reputation with that faction. So if you want to grind reputation with the Sunfields, you're more or less forced to do it. But reputation is a whole other thing that we could discuss because you don't really get a lot of rewards for grinding reputation with anyone at the moment.
That actually leads really well into my next question, because I wanted to talk about humane game design, because I think that's something, particularly as a kids game, Star Stable struggles with, because I think there's definitely a sentiment that like you don't want kids to binge games, and that's totally valid. But at the same time, like you need consistent gameplay loops for an MMO, otherwise it's like it defeats the point of it being an MMO. Like playing a game is supposed to have an infinite loop, but the way Star Stable is currently designed, with the limits to reputation you can grind in a day or quests you can do in a day, it can stop that loop and make it a little bit jarring. What is your thought process on how the humane design should be balanced, and what are some of the things that you think could be improved in Star Stable to make it a little bit equal on both sides, I guess? I don't know how to put that.
For some of the design points, let's start about the day blockers, actually, because they are an example of potentially well-intentioned humane design, but that I think has gone wrong in a few places. In that the day blockers, that is the little heart that appears over a character. No, not heart. The clock that appears over a character that says you have to wait until next day or sleep overnight to keep playing this quest. And ideally, this should work as exit points for a player. Like it's like those kind of, it's a harder version of those kind of reminders that say, hey, you've been playing for a while, why not taking a break? Which is kind of important to emphasize when you're working with younger children. However, we have a few of those that are currently not spread out very well. Maybe you go pay to sleep overnight, and then you play 1 or 2 quests in the same quest chain, and then you get another day blocker.
Yep.
And that, I think, defeats the purpose. If you actually pay to sleep overnight, you should get the value of a session's worth of playtime when it comes to quest-wise.
For sure.
So that's something I think could use some improvements overall in the game, and even asking how we use those. There's also things like the horse carrying system, which is a bit backwards right now, as it kind of it's a system that always penalizes the players if they don't take care of their horses. And if you don't feed and water your horses, they will get very sad. That might be realistic, but it's not a fun way to think about it in a game. It's also kind of disincentivizing players to buy more horses, because the more horses you have, the more time you have to spend caring for them each day.
Or you feel like you have to get stable care. Like I have 90 something horses, and it's like, oh no, I'm paying for stable care, which cuts out my ability to get new horses as well, because it's like, oh well, half of my allowance is going to paying to just play the game at a normal rate.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit strange that it seems like if we want to make people buy horses, then it probably shouldn't be a chore to have many horses. Sure, in real life it might be a huge chore to take care of a lot of horses, but this is a game. We're meant to make reality fun. We should make being surrounded by 30 horses should be the best moment possible. not a moment when you think, oh god, I'm gonna have to give each of these a carrot.
And then I have to go pay for the carrots, grind to get all that.
And I have to, and if I want stable care, I have to click 30 times to have it for a month.
You can go on the app though. That's what I do. But that leads to then people aren't logging on, because like the stable care through the app. Like I know people who, to myself included at some points, like I'm like, oh well, I don't want to play right now, and so I'll just do it on my phone and won't even boot up Star Stable, and I'm sure that hurts.
Yeah,
login statistics.
And of course we don't want to. We don't want to reward people for not playing the game, but that's a bit what the carrying system does at the moment. It's instead of rewarding you for logging on, it punishes you for not playing. Instead, except if you purchase stable care, in which case you are rewarded for not playing the game. I think this is something that will need to be changed, and we are doing a lot of thought work on the carrying system this year. I cannot guarantee when this will be released again, but it's something that we have been discussing a lot more recently, because we feel like caring for your horse is something that is so important, but it's curiously enough something that no horse game has really gotten carrying right. Even the Main Quest blog, do you know that blog?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
She's a game developer who writes about horse games. She is on the Main Quest after the world's best horse game. She still hasn't found one. But the thing was there that she pointed out Star Stable as having one of the best carrying systems, because you didn't have to play a ridiculous minigame every time you want to care for your horse. And I felt that was a very low bar of praise.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a fair assessment, because like Star Stable, it's like, yeah, you just click and interact with your horse a couple of times. I think it'd be nice if there were mini games, like if some of the full lap mini games were brought over for like extra points or something like that, or just for the animations. But just being able to like, all right, here's your food, here's your water, all right, let's go ride is nice, because it allows for kids who don't have a lot of time just hop on and play.
I think that's a very good idea to make some of these carrying games optional, because I think especially younger kids can probably play those minigames many times without getting bored of them. But a lot of people in our age might not have that time and might not be as entertained of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think it could also be made better if it's works, again, here comes this word holistically again, but if it also works with with other systems in the game. And like right now, you get punished for not caring for your horse, and it's mandatory to care for your horse. But caring for your horse is just one step of it's just one of the many things you can do as an equestrian, and it should really play into these other things. So one change might be that if you've done a daily care for your horse gets into a happy state, and as long as it's in this happy state, you get occasionally a little heart from the horse while you're just riding around, which will give you horse XP just for hanging out with your horse, or something that actually tells the player that we want you to come here and take care of your horse because you will be rewarded for it, instead of you will be punished if you don't dare to take care of your horse.
I think looking at particularly the Star Stable Autumn Riders CD-ROM game is interesting how that was developed with caring, because it was all of those games were linked to endurance, which I know would be a difficult thing to add to Star Stable, it being an MMO, and having endurance to run around such a big world would be painstaking in a lot of ways. But the balance in that, I think, would be interesting to look at from a design point, and how caring for your horse and finding like special things to feed your horse boost your ability to perform. And obviously that has complications when it comes to multiplayer competition, but I think it's an interesting comparison to see how that might influence what you guys are working on now. Particularly, I mean, I wouldn't mind endurance coming back for some races, but I think it's a very interesting system with a lot of the same simplicity that Star Stable still has, because for caring, it's still just hop off, water your horse, feed your horse, get back on, all right, we go.
Yeah, what you say about having endurance as a mechanic race could be interesting, or like there could be certain rougher places in the world maybe where your horse has to have endurance to be able to get by. So if it's implemented in closed scenarios, it might be interesting to use such a mechanic.
I would definitely be interested in seeing more terrain kind of things, or weather effects. I really like the implications of the cold resistant horses. I would love to see like heat resistant horses, since there is, at least per the CD-ROM canon, a desert on Jorvik on the north of the island, which makes less sense. But I would be really interested in seeing stuff like that, because it goes back to the idea of like each horse is an experience, and particularly if horses can be collected without star coins, it adds like, okay, well, I went on this adventure with this horse, or in choosing not to get one of those resistant horses, I struggled through this even harder with my starter, and even closed our bond even more. I think it goes back to that narrative of like horses being good at different things. It would be really interesting to see more of those kinds of buffs and debuffs in other breeds.
Yeah, I think that would work well. Whenever we remake the stat system, it will probably be in many steps, but one of those steps should definitely be to look at how would different horses excel at different things. And you have the cold resistant horse for Dino Valley. If we ever implement a desert region, which so far has not been declared non-canon, so it exists. The Iron Desert coming ... maybe. But it's also something I know that we in the team, because there are a lot of people on the team that would absolutely love to do a desert environment, and especially amongst several of the artists, there are people who just see how much fun it would be to visualize such an environment. But overall, it might be something to also consider with terrain overall in the game. Like maybe we start giving horses, if we go back to the ability tree, maybe one horse could get a special ability that would allow it to brave steeper terrain, so it can actually run up cliffs that other horses wouldn't be able to. It's now a Skyrim horse. Or maybe horses would be able to get an extended swim bar, which would allow them to swim for up to half a minute. That could be kind of interesting thing with skill trees, because those would be things that wouldn't just give a passive boost, but actually change the way you could play the game.
That I really love that, and it also helps with my transition because exploring the world is such a big deal in Star Stable, and that's actually why I'm curious why there's and I don't know if you can actually get banned for it still, but if you go into a closed area, you get kicked back to your home stable, and it's like, do this again, you'll get banned. I understand the sentiment of, like, you don't want players in closed areas because they might get spoilers or something like that, or the area isn't complete, and so you don't want them glitching things out. I'm curious, though, why is there the threat of you may get banned for exploring the world, though? Because that is the main Star Stable core loop, and it sounds like that's something you wanted to design, is you want people exploring. So the two kind of seem to clash with each other. So what is going on with that kind of decision making?
That is an interesting question. I know that we have that warning with a red circle with a cross or something. I think a lot of players have seen it at one time or another, because sometimes it even accidentally pops up. But I should just say, as an just to ensure everyone that we do not just walk in and ban people because they ping on our radar that they have been in an out of bounds area. It's not something we're actively looking out people and banning for. We do, however, want to make sure that people are not doing this because it can cause a lot of other problems.
Okay.
I can relate a story that I've heard from our customer support that players sometimes manage to do glitches that will allow them to bug themselves into regions where they're not supposed to be yet. Like Epona is the most common one because it's the high level area. And then when they're there, they set their home stable to Epona. This means that next time they go back to their home stable, they will get a message that they're in a locked area that will send them back to their home stable, which is in Epona, which will tell them that they're in a locked area and send them back to their home stable. It's an infinite loop, and the only way to get free is to send a mail to our customer support. And they have to spend a lot of time manually looking up that player in the database and moving that player to another location. And we really don't want them to spend a lot of time on that. It could be better spent elsewhere.
Fair.
We also obviously don't want players to go and look at content that is unfinished. But again, this is mainly not a bannable offense, but it's something that we would prefer that the community doesn't do, because it's, in most cases, anything that is locked away from players are not finished. And when that is spread, rumors tend to spread. And when rumors spread, people tend to assume the worst because we can't communicate anything that isn't supposed to be shown yet. So if players go in somewhere and see something that isn't finished and they start discussing it, it could result in a lot of assumptions of what might happen or what might not happen, and then get disappointed, or when it turns out that their speculation might have been wrong. But mainly the reason we don't want players to do it is that they might be breaking the game for themselves, and it takes us a lot of time to fix that.
Okay, that is fair. That is not something I had heard before, so it's definitely I definitely appreciate that explanation. I guess going on,
we do. However, if a player should somehow find a way to take advantage of a bug that would allow them to grant themselves an unfair advantage in any way in the game, like, I don't know, somehow glitch a quest so they could get XP constantly and get themselves to level 30 or something crazy, those are people that we ban.
Okay.
But only if we can see that they've clearly been exploiting this for their own benefits. Like, we can see that, okay, this player cleared the same quest 30,000 times. There's no way that this player didn't know what they were doing. If someone just accidentally stumbles upon a bug and gets it once, that's not a big deal. That's on us. We might remove that XP, but we're not going to take actions if we can't say for certain that this player has clearly been exploiting the system.
That's fair. I guess moving on to the idea of, like, limited areas. I'm curious why the free-to-play area is so small, because we've talked about the exploration being such a big focus in the core loop. But the free-to-play area is just Moreland and Fort Pinta, and that's such a small zone for a map, for a game that's supposed to be about exploration. Why is that area so small for free players as a demo?
Yeah, the real answer to that is really just what you said, that the free area is a demo. And we are not really a free-to-play game. We have a free area where you can do a lot of things in it, but it's really meant to just showcase this is what you will get even more of if you buy the full game. So it's not really intended as a way to be able to play the game as a free player, but rather we show you what the game has to offer, and if you like that, you can buy the game.
My concern for that is that the free area is very small, and it's very hard to see the rest of the map. And at least for myself, what got me to play the game was not just like I got on like launch week in English, and they gave everyone like a free month of membership for everyone who signed up for the beta. So I was on the very first week, and the thing that got me to play, I was enjoying myself in the free area and in Silverglade, but the thing that got me to buy my membership was seeing Golden Hills. And I wonder if leaving that area so limited and not actually engaging in that core loop of getting to explore at least Silverglade doesn't give enough of a showcase to show all of the amazing things Star Stable has. And I wouldn't suggest ever that Star Stable should switch from buy to play to free to play, but would it ever be a consideration to at least expand to just Silverglade region for free players? Like, they don't get any extra quests, they don't get any dailies, they just get the area to look around in and engage with other people, but also so they can see more of what Star Stable is.
There are some that's a valid question, and I can see the point about exploration, but I also think there is a risk of doing that in that there you will be creating a lot of negative possibility space, because you will have that huge area to explore, but if we don't give any gameplay to go along with it, you will really only be exploring the graphics. You won't get any cool moments where you find something and there's something there that actually rewards you for finding a new location.
Well, potentially you could interact with higher paying people, and that builds community, because then you have a friend or a writing club who, let's go do this championship together, or we'll do a group race, and the paying member can encourage the free players to come do it, and then the free players can then pay and do that for other people, and that encourages I would think that would encourage a positive community loop, at least.
Yeah, it's certainly a good point, especially for the community part. I think even more if we could actually incentivize players that have played the game for longer to really take care of newer players. Because generally, if these high level and low level players weren't friends before, they are generally not very likely to interact with each other, as people at lower levels tend to not be very keen to socialize a lot in RPGs before they are really comfortable inside the game, and a lot of high level players tend to be very elitistic about quotation mark talking to noobs.
Yep. No, I feel that.
So I think it's a good idea about a great point about incentivizing community building, but I think there needs to be a few bit more incentives in place to also do that.
That's fair.
But I think there's also a valid point about the free area isn't necessarily a great design as an onboarding experience right now. Like when you first come to the game, that's the very oldest part of the game. Sure, we've updated some of the visuals now, but the quests and stuff are still the first ones that were made in the game. I've seen several people play the tutorial, and they do the first quest of talking to Justin, and then they just want to take care of their horse. But they don't get their care items before they complete the tutorial, and they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of people that don't even make it past level 1 that way. So I think something that we might rather do is focusing on how can we make the free area be as a great experience as possible to show off how good the game can be in the full game.
Yeah.
Before we start thinking about actually expanding the area.
That's fair. But the tutorials are a difficult thing to balance, so best of luck on solving that. Would it going to, on the community point, championships right now are really the only major ongoing event that people can just pop in and join. Is there any intention to run championships more often than they are? Because this goes back to the humane design topic as well. Why do they run so infrequently to the point that most days you would maybe get 5 championships running in a day at all? I was just curious, like, what's going on with that scheduling system, because I understand that it's set to be like after school, but I know a lot of people who play like on the North American server, because those are the most populated ones, and they can't, unless they want to wake up at like 3 a.m, they can't play at those times to do championships at least.
Championship schedules, I don't know exactly what the reasoning is that, but it is something we have been discussing a lot and been very close to a lot of times to actually go out there and expanding them. And I think it's something we are going to be looking to do very soon, at least.
Okay.
At the very least, trying to temporarily add more championships, maybe for an event or something like that. We might even introduce some sort of training wheel championships that you can play a championship for fun without getting any rewards, just to customize yourself with the terrain. So you can actually train in and when the championship comes around, you can have familiarized yourself with it, so you have a better chance of winning. And I'm also hoping, of course, that we can tie championships to something else, like we talked about before, with new currencies and reward models and stuff like that. Because right now, there isn't a lot of reason to keep doing championships when you reached first place. Yeah, you can sell it for some Jorvik shillings, but we've also, as previously mentioned, it's not super valuable.
But that also, like, for people who aren't good at championships, like on my server, there are like 5 people who are almost always on doing championships, and so I can't do I still have not been able to do the nice now do it twice achievement, and so I think it also, with the limited amount of time, it makes it a lot harder for people to get into it, because there are people who've just come in and dominated that scene.
Yeah, and I think if we spread them out a bit more the day, it would also be a lot fairer to people who might have work or even school at different hours, or just I think this is more of a problem in America than in Europe, which is why this problem exists. That maybe there's someone on the West Coast plays on the East Coast, and then the time offset is still pretty huge.
Yep, you can get the 4-hour gap there.
Yeah, and that's something that adding a few more would still benefit. And I'm hoping that there might we've steered away from it before because we've had some technical issues with the championships, but we're hoping that we can start at least testing kind of soon, adding a few more championships and see what happens.
Oh, all right.
It's still a maybe, but because we've been trying to make it happen a few times now, and at least for an event, saying that, hey, this is championship months, we will temporarily double the championship times for all championships or something. Right. Would be interesting.
I would even be willing, particularly if like there was like a way to do a writing club bank, clubs or individual people being able to save up shillings to pay for a bonus one, because that would be great for me for doing streams. because then I could save up shillings in a week or have my stream save up and put it all in a club bank or something like that, and then we can all host a championship for a stream, and that would be both for in-game and out-of-game. I feel like a good way to build and foster that community, and encourage content creators to have something to do when they release their content, depending on obviously the price.
Yeah, that's definitely positive for community building, and that people can create videos around it. Mm-hmm. Championships is one of those times when people can actually come together to interact in the game for a gameplay reason.
Mm-hmm. That's something I'm looking forward to do. I would look forward to do for streams, because right now we're doing A to B races, because I still haven't got that achievement either. One of the things, though, talking about currency, is I want to talk about the holiday currency, because Star Stable, since Halloween this year, has been resetting all of the currencies. And I'm curious, what's the design philosophy going into that? Because in resetting them, it's definitely made some people feel like they're obligated to play this year. And while I understand that helps Star Stable, you want them to get on and play, it's made, particularly for the Christmas event, it made a lot of people I know very resentful to the idea of having to completely reset on all their Christmas wishes. So what's going on with this currency reset that you guys have been doing there?
Well, the currency reset is one of those legacy blows that I think just right now, both as a game and as a community, because most games, to my knowledge, do not allow you to carry over event-specific gains between different events. Because using an event in game design is really that you're creating the event for the reason that you want players to come on and play during that period. And then those people who do come along to play are rewarded with special items and such. And that doesn't really hold up if you have some player with 135 wishes from last year who can just go in, buy everything. But there are some other interesting comments on the event for Christmas in particular this year with Yule Goats. Because we have been taking in a lot of feedback on pumpkins. Both of those were using the same kind of new system that we've been trying out and hoping to expand on. So it's very valuable for us to get an understanding in what works and what doesn't. And I think there are several things that worked during Halloween and Christmas, and several things that didn't. I think having something that is way too grindy during a timed event is scary, because it really stresses out people. So that's something that's very important to find a balance on moving forward. That we should be. We want to set a guideline where we think that if players need to get all the items from this event, they need to be this amount of active, and then working from there to see what we could make from it.
Okay. Would instead of completely resetting the currency, would Star Stable consider a currency 5 of last year Christmas wishes for this year Christmas wishes, so that for people who did play last year, there's still a reward for having played Star Stable, but they're still encouraged to play again this year, and that might help mitigate some of that resentment for legacy players?
I don't think we have any plans of doing that.
Okay.
I think this is one of those sad legacy things that is a blow that we just have to take to make the game better in the future.
Okay.
Because there has been a habit for legacy players that they know that Star Stable will turn this event and they will always be able to use this item. So now when they suddenly can't, then we're breaking an expectation. We're basically breaking a promise that we have been keeping for 7 years.
Yeah.
But I think that it will leave the game health in a better place going forward, because it will also not encourage people to play the event a lot in hopes of maybe benefiting in the future when that is uncertain, which is not a great way to do it. I think maybe something that because old wishes haven't gone away, and that's kind of annoying. Maybe if there's some shilling and you could buy wishes for Jorvik shilling in some way, so you could have you could at least benefit indirectly from the grinding. That might be a thing, and that would still allow players who have grinded in other places to buy them. Maybe something like that, but we'll have to see. We're still definitely investigating how we will approach grinding with new kinds of gameplay.
That's fair.
And I hope that once we can cement this and introduce these kind of systems for more permanent additions in the game, they will feel fairer towards everyone.
Okay. That is perfectly fair. Well, we have spent a good deal of time talking about inside the game, but I figure we should talk a little bit, and I know this starts to lean out of your area and more into communications, but for what you can, I had a couple questions about outside the game, and like how the community interacts. One of the reasons I've been so excited for this opportunity is that we haven't ever really had, as a community, the opportunity to speak to the devs one-on-one, with the exception of the communities that you have very generously hopped into and participated in. But they're, most of the time when Star Stable players interact with Star Stable devs, it's through a layer of telephone and having to go through the PR teams. Is there any interest on your part in developing some kind of forum or official communication website where you guys could have, maybe not weekly, but maybe monthly or bi-monthly AMAs with your community, so that these kinds of questions can get more directly to you without exhausting you on your free time?
Yeah, again, of course, this is as a bit outside of my work environment, so to speak. But I like interacting with the community, and I know that as a player, I get so happy when devs interact with me. So now when I'm a dev myself, I want to be able to give the community that opportunity. And we have some devs that are quite active. GM Gwendolyn is pretty active in interacting with the community, for instance. But there is those are kind of difficult to just come past as a player, as there's no current official forum or really any place where you can always talk to the devs. And I actually asked the community team about this. And the answer that I got is that the question of an official forum has been discussed in the past many times, and it's something that several of them really wants to do, because it will allow those developers that are more willing to talk to the players to do so in a place where they can have a greater outreach. I mean, I'm here doing this on my free time because I really enjoy it. And you're cool enough to give me that window into
I mean, that's a two-way street. You are cool enough to do an interview with me, so.
But yeah, the reason that we haven't really gotten a forum is that, or any subreddit or any place like that, it has really come down to that we haven't solved how to moderate such a place. That it would take more resources to create and prioritize than the community team currently has. And it would also require a place to host it, which would require the web team to become involved. And I know that the community team are looking for other ways to reach out, but currently it's sadly not looking too good for creating something like an open forum or AMAs, which is very sad because I think that would benefit both the company and the fans. But
well,
yeah,
if there's anything,
it is what it is.
If this in any way works out, I'd be happy to organize something with the community and get to talk to you and your coworkers more about this kind of thing, because that would be a wonderful opportunity for both of us, and I would love to be a part of that and being able for y'all to communicate more, because I think I already said it. I think the honesty and the communication with the team is the biggest thing to make not only the game feel more appealing, but like it's hard to support a business when it doesn't feel like you're supporting people. And I would be very excited to be behind helping support the people behind the business.
Yeah, it's much more human when you have a face to talk to rather than a disembodied company, right?
Or even
but that's
linking Discord icons.
Yeah. but that's also like I am in a few. Some of the players GM, some they do not, and I'm mostly there to spy on people who are giving feedback or making cool theories or learning Swedish. But
Swedish isn't very good yet. Sorry.
It's pretty cool, I think. Yeah. But I just like to add on to this with moderating a forum, because currently our community team is also a quite small one. And I think a lot of players who write on Instagram or sends us letters to support, I think a lot of them don't really have the connect that this is not the developers they're talking to, or even that sometimes these are people who are sitting who have to receive those emails, and that can, like, our community team and our support team and our social media team, they are freaking heroes for dealing with the things they have to put up on a daily basis, because the worst comments tend to get deleted pretty fast, and they are not pretty. And I can imagine how much they would have to set up to moderate a forum. I don't think it would entirely, even if it wouldn't entirely be moderated just by Star Stable members, but by outstanding members of the community. They would still need like an evaluation process for those people. They would need to know that such people could be on hand, and it would need to be set up from the beginning. And of course, there's the whole issues with GDPR and COPPA that tends to always pop up these days when we're talking about a game which is aimed at a younger audience. Again, I know that so many of us would absolutely love better ways to communicate, but I hope we can find more ways to do these communications in the future.
For sure.
Maybe dev streams is something that some people have talked to me about as well, and I think that would also be a really cool idea. Just if we have something that's visual to look at, it might not be interesting to see me pour over Excel sheets for a few hours. It would probably be more if I'm actually making like a cutscene or something. It could be more interesting, but generally, I think that would need to be an artist or an animator, because watching a designer or programmer work is not always very interesting.
I don't know. I love looking over Excel spreadsheets for data, so like I would happily.
Hey, high five!
There we go. Man, I just need to learn to code, and then maybe I can apply to be a game designer somewhere. So we'll see. All right. But speaking on like the community and like some of the toxicity and reporting being a big deal, there is currently a reporting system being developed on the Swedish servers right now. Is that correct? Like an in-game one.
We are testing out a report a player feature.
Okay. I guess, why is the in-game version better than the going to the website version? And I have ideas of why it is, but for the community. And I guess, when can we expect to see that on more servers?
Well, currently, it has taken a lot of more time to develop this in-game reporting system than you would think from just looking at it. We really want it to be as simplistic as possible for the players. So for those who aren't in Swedish servers, this means that you can report someone just by clicking on them, inspecting them, and choose report, or clicking their name in the chat and choose report. However, what's going on behind the scenes is actually a lot more complex, because we have to, first of all, the game wasn't built to account for this kind of reporting to begin with, so an entirely new system had to be built on the back end. I'm not going to say anything about how this works, because of safety reasons,
Yeah.
obviously. But it's an ongoing process, and we are not able to roll it out just yet. And we'll simply have to see when that can be possible. But player safety is a huge concern, obviously, and I'm very happy that we're at least able to system in the game. And hopefully we can also build on that technology in the future to do stuff that aren't just negative.
For sure. Like, I think I mentioned in my Discord Starship server the idea of being able to send sweet notes or suggestions in game without having to log off to do it.
Suggestions would be great, and also sending bug reports. That way we can check exactly what player when the bug report was sent.
For sure.
That would be hugely helpful. Or even what we talked about earlier about maybe getting older players to help younger players. On our system where like players can give a medal or something to an older player. Like this player was helpful to me.
That like a kudos. Oh yeah, that would be really good.
That could be that could be very nice.
Yeah,
that's definitely in the far future right now. We want to make sure this is working, of course, but as a game designer, I'm always having this, we can do this. That means we can do that and that and that.
I really like the idea of being able to go to the Star Stable office in Jorvik City and just like go around and give kudos to like all of the devs because y'all deserve it. That
would be so much fun.
It would also, I think
I can imagine the artists would hate one and we would be like, hey, can you model every person in the office?
But I also really like the idea of it because, and I understand for the artists, it'll be a pain to do 140 people that work in the office. But I think that particularly with how the credits work right now, like only 30 people are credited for creating Star Stable, and that's not reflective of the entire team.
A lot of them don't even work here anymore.
And I think having that office goes back to the point we were talking about earlier about how like a lot of people on Instagram don't realize that the community team is not even the devs. And I think having, as much as the pain as it would be for the artists, having that actual office to go around and explore and be like, oh, there are a lot of people here would mean so much for helping make that degree of separation for people. And not to mention to be a really interesting way to do credits. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a game do an interactive credits like that. And it also is an opportunity to, particularly since Star Stable has a big focus on encouraging girls to get into gaming and to include game development, I would imagine. It's a great way to be like, well, this is what this person does. And it has a great way to teach them about the industry in a way that they probably don't have access to without like looking it up or feeling like they have to go to a school.
I just love everything you're saying here so much. I would like I can see all do with something like this, and maybe you wouldn't even have to do a full model of every person. Like you can just use some of the generic NPCs and adapt them a bit. Maybe the boss can be like Garnock or Frick or something like some big guy.
There you go.
But it would be interesting to, because Chrono Trigger, the old game, had something like that, but it was mostly a joke. And Pokemon also tends to have like 3 people from Game Freak who are just hanging around and give you something, but it's not really an interactive credits that will tell you more about how to get into game development, because that would be super interesting. I usually get a lot of questions when we're doing events and stuff from parents, like, yeah, my kid has been really interested in making their own games as long as they've been playing Star Stable. So how can we encourage this interest? And that would be something pretty nice to have in the game as well.
I would love to see that.
We've talked about it before, and I think I wanted to do every uses the code on that building to like, but at some point, I need to put a completely random number here that is a secret code that opens the office, and then you can just walk around and people will say, hey, we're working on a horse game here.
Here, have some Jorvik Shillings and get out.
Yeah, it would be a super neat Easter egg. You should probably hat or something special for finding it, but then just walking around and talking to people who explains their day jobs. It would be so much fun.
Speaking of well, I shouldn't say speaking of day jobs, but speaking of jobs at Star Stable is a very story-heavy game, and like most game developments, at least according to the credits, there is not a writing team currently at Star Stable. Is there any plan to have an official writing team for Star Stable?
We currently have, we could say that we have 3 people who work with writing at Star Stable at the moment, who are mainly involved with writing. Mm-hmm. And that's our narrative director, who sets the entire course for what the IP should be narratively, works a lot with the game, and he has also been very much responsible of finding the tone of voice which with Star Stable speaks nowadays. And I think he came in a few years ago, and I think the dialogue and the characterization has made leaps and bounds in improvement since we got him online. And we recently hired the first person to the game writing team.
Oh, okay.
Who is a person we hired in November last year. So she's been here for a few months. And of course, there is Helena Dahlgren, who is hired to write the books and the novels about the Soul Riders. She doesn't work from the office, but she's some combination of being on board and being a freelancer. But she has actually also helped write some texts that are not yet in the game, but will be in the future. This is a thing I can guarantee. But we've even worked with some things she has written and made them into the game. Like she wrote that short story Texas Bluebells for Lisa, which released as an audio novel, and or audio short story. It's not exactly a novel, but and then we also made a little quest that was based on that short story in the game.
I am definitely interested in reading more of their work. I'm very excited for the English novels, although apparently since I'm learning Swedish, I should be picking up the Swedish versions and practicing. But I'm very excited for the first one to be coming out in my first language.
Is this where we should? Is this where we should like advertise the? Pick it up.
If you want, I just linked on the name of the book, but yeah, absolutely. If we want to plug that real quick, I am happy to remind folks that the new Soul Riders book is coming out in March, right?
Yes, the first book of the trilogy Soul Rider in March. Right. It's been out in Swedish for some time now, and the second book has been also been released in Swedish since the summer last year. But now we're looking to get them released in other languages, so that is very exciting. I'm happy. I'm hopefully finally going to get to discuss the contents of those books with the English-speaking audience without spoiling them. Yay. Because particularly the second book, I'm a real fan of. Not to discourage people from buying the first book. They're part of a trilogy. Yeah. I just feel like they're great, and the short stories that Helena writes are also great, and I hope that we will get that out in English as well now when we have the book deal.
Yay! I'm very excited for that. But on that point, and I don't. This is difficult because I understand the need to retcon, particularly as the CD-ROM games become progressively more difficult to get for the average player. And so I understand why writing the novels is important to retcon the story of the Soul Riders into something new. But at the same time, when there is only one account or one character per account, and it's harder to engage with some of that news story that may be added back into old quests or rewritten in old quests, there is a lot of story that I've missed out on because I haven't paid to get a second account. What is the thought process, at least as best you know, from the writing team as to retconning narrative and changing it? Because it seems like there's been quite a bit changed, and not so much access to replaying it to engage with that.
This is a good question. It's also a bit difficult for me to answer, so I'll see if I can come up with a good answer. But to tackle one part of this question, it kind of always makes me sad whenever I hear about people buying the game a second time or even a third time for some, just to get to play through it again. It's their money and their decision, but I personally feel like that's not a way we want to make money, and that's not something we encourage players to do. But thanks to technical limitations, we do only have one character per account. So if someone wants to experience the game from the beginning again, or if they want to do something that involves checking out early things, like when we're going to update the Soul Riders and all the old quests, we're probably going to get a lot of people that want to play through the old quests again. And the only way is to rebuy the game, and that doesn't feel right to me. It's not fully an answer to the question, but I just wanted to say that especially now when the Soul Riders are going to be updated the game very soon, and that is also going to include some minor changes to the to some quests and to the game that, of course, experienced players are not currently going to see. And I'm hoping that this will not feel like we will want to try to encourage people to rebuy the game, because I think we would get the people who rebuy the game are a few very dedicated fans, and I think we would get so much more value if we could just add an engagement thing that would let you replay old quests, or the ability to, like, you can create a character, then you can buy characters for 500 star coins or something,
For sure.
and then you can create another character. And I think that would definitely encourage more people to create more characters without having to feel like we're making people rebuy the game. But that's a personal tangent. This does reflect this does not reflect the opinions of anyone else then. And there is huge technical issues that prevents us from implementing any of these things. But as someone who has personally worked a lot on replacing the Soul Riders, I'm really scared of. This goes back to humane game design, right? You don't want to force people to buy a game twice.
For sure.
That's insane. You bought the game. Should have it.
Should be able to play all of it,
So I'm really hoping multiple character accounts will be something we'll have in the future.
I really hope so too, although I worry then that some people will want to merge accounts, and I don't know how that would be handled. So
yeah, that's one big difficulty you've spotted right there, right? Because I can just imagine the nightmare customer team if, like, okay, so we're taking this account and moving it to this account, and we have to, like, have a guarantee that both of these accounts are also owned by the same person, so they will probably need to provide us with payment details or something. And there's already a lot of problems with things like switching mailing addresses, because a lot of things are so intrinsically tied to that one account. But leaving that aside and actually moving to the more core of your question, the one about retcons and how players can keep up. We are, of course, retconning or retelling a lot of things that happened in the Starshine Legacy games, because, as you also pointed out, those games are old. It's very difficult to find them because we don't have the distribution rights, so we can't even release them on Steam or anything, or on the Star Stable shop. And those games were also made in a different. And while a lot of players might enjoy them for nostalgia, they don't perfectly match up with our brand as we envision it right now. So it's from that viewpoint, it's much easier to say that the novels and the game is really what is canon for now. And other media that we might be releasing in the future will also be a canon. We're not as confused about the things we're releasing now as we were a few years ago. But I can understand how jarring it is to players when we updated James, we did a new intro quest because James did not have a proper introduction to the game.
Yeah.
And a lot of old players made many comments like, why is James acting as if we never met him?
Yeah.
We really just wanted everyone to get the ability to play those quests. But a lot of people seem to be really confused about something that is really meant for new players to experience within the first few hours of gameplay.
That's something that
might have a negative effect of how we present old things to new things to old players in the future. We'll see about that.
Something I liked about the Mayor Peanut quests, because it made it very quickly into that line when in the timeline I was playing. It might be something easier, although arguably this would get difficult with, maybe it wouldn't get difficult with holidays, but like adding a level tag to quests to indicate like, oh, you would get this at level 2, shows that this is a beginner level quest, this is something you would get at the start of the game, might help some of that confusion for people who are like, why is James introducing himself again? Well, it's because this is a starter quest, this isn't a level 16 quest. Although I imagine that would be a lot of tagging for the writing team.
Yeah, that is an interesting suggestion, though, because we do currently tag all quests by level. It's just not something we're presenting to the players visually. So it might not be a huge thing to display the level when the quest unlocks, which would be the intended level you would be playing it at on like the quest accept screen. Yeah, maybe. But if that might help with some of that confusion, I could see it being a good idea. Well, but there's also a lot of things that has happened. Like we did at some point change the timeline on how long some of those Soul Riders have been gone. And the official statement is that Anne was trapped in Pandoria for a few months.
Yeah.
And which is important to the story because it has actually obviously affected her physically and mentally to be trapped in that place for so long. In contrast, Lisa's disappearance is supposed to be a lot shorter because she's supposed to not have been in Pandoria for a long time or being stored at near the surface in Pandoria. So that's something that a player would be able to find out during a few days or a week in Jorvik, maybe. But for players who started playing the game when it came out, of course, it took years to save Lisa. So that always creates an interesting story that is constantly ongoing, because to most players it has taken years to save Anne, while in the story in canon she was gone for a few months.
And like when I played it, she was in there for 2 years and it went down to 2 months, and I'm like, okay. So that's a big gap. I know.
I think that was originally influenced by the idea that she would have been the time you played the game would have been the same amount of time that would pass in the game. But that's an idea that we have scrapped by now.
Okay. Just as a suggestion, I know Guild Wars 2, they have a quest recap you can look at on your hero panel, and they'll put in years when things happened, and that story takes place over a lot longer amount of time, but just having a date log for like, this is when Star Stable canonically starts and this is when it canonically is currently going on. One, it helps ground it for world building, but two, it also helps with that the gap and like reminding people of like, how long have you been on Jorvik? Because I know that's something that a lot of people who do fan fiction, they're trying to figure out canon, are like, well, how long have we been on Jorvik? Has it been like 2 months or 7 years, or
I've seen a lot of people who work a lot with building in Jorvik, fight with the timeline a lot. Like, when was this quest updated? When was this released? That means that my character did what during that time, and things like that. But actual timeline in the game story isn't supposed to be a match to the speed at which the game updates. Not anymore, at the very least. I think that might have been the idea, but that would just cause a great deal of confusion to a new player. If a new player is playing the game for a month and the characters would start acting like they've been there for 7 years or something.
Big gap for new folks. So I definitely, that change definitely makes sense. But I think it just comes back to the accessibility.
And a timeline is something that it's interesting for world building purposes, but the difficulty with releasing a timeline initially, of course, that then we have to know that this is something we can 100% stick to and don't have to go back and retcon again, because the risk is releasing something like that is that we can cause even more confusion if we really paint ourselves into a corner and discover that something just doesn't work. Like when Nintendo released the Zelda timeline.
Oh, don't get me started on that one. I spent too long looking at the Zelda timeline. But going off of the idea of fan-created content and not necessarily on timelines, I know you said you couldn't talk about this much because it's not your department. But way back when, I want to say in the first or second year of Star Stable being out, they ran a t-shirt contest where players full-on designed a t-shirt, and unlike with the original Wild Horse contest where it was like just pick and choose kind of adventure, it was a full-on player-created design. Would Star Stable ever be interested, in your capacity to answer, doing more like fan-created contests like that, and making t-shirts, or potentially for writing short stories, for fleshing out the world for the writing team, or anything along those lines, to add more of the artists in the community and the writers to be able to interact with getting their voices spread a little bit more through the game.
While this isn't really something I can speak out on. I did speak to many of the teams which have more connection with the questions you sent me, and I did get some comments on it. That generally the feedback was super positive on doing more contests like t-shirts or other fan-generated content, both visual or in writing as well. There are some hurdles to that, and that we don't really have a great place where we can present something like that, which goes back a bit to the whole don't have a forum or an official channel thing. But everyone around the office just seems to be very enthusiastic whenever those topics are brought up, which shouldn't be. We shouldn't hope, because things always go wrong at some place, because that's life. But I think that doing something like showcasing people's art and writing could definitely be a thing, especially as we start to actually put out books and short stories. I think we should offer more ways to the writers in the community to help promote themselves through us. And maybe it would be interesting if we had something like books about lore in the game. That could be interesting to do as a contest. Players can write books about. They can write a 500-word something like the length of a Skyrim book, something like that, and send it in within. And these are the categories you can choose to write about, and we will. The winners will be featured in the game.
That'd be so cool.
It would be with like having their title or something.
For sure.
I definitely think everyone wants to do these things. It's more a matter of figuring out how we would do it.
I guess pushing off that idea, then there are a lot of MMOs that will have creator corners where they sell art that has been purchased and all rights given to the creator or their royalty shares. They will sell merchandise with their fan created content on shirts, and they'll have community contests to see which design wins. Would that then, by extension, be something that the community would consider, or the dev team would consider to do with the community?
So with a creators corner, we currently don't have a lot of places where we show off fan-made content, which we should have in general. But here it also kind of intersects with the SSO store and the fact that it's a bit of an abandoned project at this time. Which is kind of sad, because I know that a lot of developers would love to have merchandise from the game we're working on, and since we do allow the community to use things like you're always allowed to use the songs in the game to make your YouTube videos, and you're allowed to use the songs for intros and such. Lisa or DJ Kai or the Miscreants or whatever music we've released, we're trying really hard to not make YouTube take it down when anyone uses it in a video. It's a never-ending struggle, apparently. So I would think that as a company, we wouldn't be completely opposed to the idea of some kind of creators corner. That's at least what I would like to think. But considering that there aren't any plans to expand the store right now, and we don't really know what we would do with our own merch, and can't really answer the question of how we would approach a creators corner.
That's fair. So one of the things that particularly, and I'm sure I'm going to get some of it for doing this whole interview, because I've been incredibly critical of Star Stable, is the whole conversation on criticizing Star Stable, and that's something we've talked about a lot. But to the point, and you mentioned it, that the toxicity that the community team has gotten is ridiculous from what we've seen, and that's only what's been left in the comments. Obviously, it impacts them and their health to have to deal with that every day. What is your opinion as a developer on getting, we'll say, legitimate criticism to start and then move into the other? What does criticism do for you and your process?
That is a good question, because different people take the criticism really differently. And I can really only speak from my own experiences. But in general, I would always say that what it comes down to when you critique something is how you deliver it, and not so much the contents. Because if someone starts saying, this whole game sucks, and then after that has some legitimate criticisms, they might have ruined their chance of having anyone. They prefaced it with such an aggressively negative comment. And I know that some people have a more difficult time taking feedback than others, depending on, even regardless how it's delivered, even something that's might even not be a negative word, someone could take as negative and they don't want to view anything at all. Personally, as long as something is not super aggressively, like obviously toxicity worded, I would like to hear it, because, well, I'm here just because I find your discourse about the game interesting.
Thank you.
And I feel like that is a discussion that more people should have around the game. And I'm also one of the devs that actually troll around on Tumblr, which is entirely unmoderated by us, but generally is it's a pretty nice place compared to some things you can see on Facebook and Instagram sometimes. But, you know, the bottom of the barrel is always going to and it's difficult to say. But I feel like there's always a room for legitimate criticism. Because just some of the things we've talked about in this interview, we've had many points that we have touched on, and we have more things that we are surely to bring up. But if these things are not coming out, or if players don't dare to speak up, then we are never going to be able to get the feedback. I feel like as a game designer, it is super important for me to always know how people react to things. I was very actively trying to troll about informations about the Yule Goats all the time when that was out, because that is going to affect a future release I've been working on for a while.
Okay.
And I have to know not only why people reacted in a certain way, but what circumstances could have been changed to not make them act like that. Because interestingly, a lot of people have pointed out a lot of different things about the Yule Goats, and all of them are not necessarily contradictory, but some people like different parts. And it's always hard to nail down something that pleases everyone, but it's always good to have the proper feedback to know what seems to have worked and what didn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a thing for people in general that giving constructive criticism is something that is very difficult to do. And even in a work environment, like as a game developer, it's a skill that I will constantly have to practice actively, because we work in an iterative process and we have to be able to give feedback to our colleagues without seeming like we're being negative or dismissive. And when you have a community of so many people, there is going to be a lot of comments that aren't from people that are naturally good at giving constructive feedback. But at some point, we just have to trawl through that and see where can we find the diamonds in the rough. The community team is doing a very good initiative where they try to each week present the biggest touching points in the community right now in general, and to this update in particular. And that, I think, gives a good general overview for people who are working on the game but really don't want to either spend their time finding and reading comments, or don't want to take the risk that they will be completely discouraged because of something they read.
Fair. And I think we've touched on this too, so I guess just to wrap up this point, there is very much a Star Stable can do no wrong, let's criticize everything about Star Stable polarity in the opinions on how you approach Star Stable. And there's obviously a happy medium. This entire interview has proved there's a happy medium between the two. What would you say, particularly for the younger players in your community, what are the best tips you could give to defining the line between constructive criticism and toxic feedback on either side of that opinion?
Yeah, and you're making a very good point here, because saying just like saying I hate this isn't constructive at all. Saying I love this, it's nicer because you probably made someone feel better about it, but at the same time it's not very constructive, because without knowing the reason behind it, and I'm not going to demand that everyone who wants to express admiration for something needs to indicate exactly why they liked it. This is why I always find it a hard time to leave comments on things I really like, because even if the author would be happy to get a heart, I'm like, no, I have to describe like exactly what I liked, and I have to give good feedback. Work injuries. But I think the most important thing here for the community is to not start attacking each other over differing opinions. It is okay for some people to have the game as a happy place, and if they enjoy something, more power to them. But they shouldn't start fighting with people who either have legitimate criticism of the game or just deliver toxic comments. Like, if they attack people who give legitimate criticism, which is something I know you have experienced quite a lot of times, very sadly.
Unfortunately,
Yes, which I'm really sad about, because your blog is actually trying to actively encourage a discourse about the game, which is awesome.
Thank you. Do my best.
But a lot of people is negative. Then they want to take up a fight because they really feel so passionately about this thing, and they feel like they have to defend it. But no one has to defend anything. It's enough if the people who are happy think it's enough to leave a heart. It's better to leave it at that. Even if there's someone below them who says, "I hate this," don't start a fight with them, because that's not going to be productive. And if someone is going to try to give legitimate criticism, don't try to shut them down, but rather you might actually have a constructive conversation if you just try talking to each other. I'm happy we can talk to each other now. I know I don't think we had the best start either, but I think this works.
Yeah, it's definitely has turned around, and I'm very, very, very glad for that. So,
but that was also based on mainly misunderstanding, just reading secondhand comments and stuff, and not actually talking to each other. So I guess it's one other of those things where you can just feel like you're invincible when you sit behind a computer and you think you can type whatever comments you want to anyone, but you forget that there are real live people sitting on the other side of the screen.
And it goes back to that point too that we talked about, how like the community is always, at least currently in the setup, one step away from the developers. And so like how I heard you talking about me for the first time was through someone else, and you got information on me through someone else as well. And so there's this double layer of telephone that makes it even harder to communicate. And so that's definitely something that makes it hard. And it's important to remember that when you are speaking on something, you should always look for firsthand, and on both parties, always look for firsthand answers to questions.
Definitely. It's always looking for your sources is A&O. It goes both for news and for research, and even for something like talking to other people. Don't trust rumors on secondhand information that you haven't verified yourself. And generally, if you think you have a problem with a person you've never talked to, then you should probably just talk to them.
Yeah. Although, at least with the situation with us, there's a bit of a power imbalance there. I would like to point out.
Yeah, and I feel like I have at some points had to tell people specifically, don't go attack writing on Jorvik, because I feel like some people have sometimes brought your articles to me and asked for my opinion on them. And even if I don't think those people who did that in particular, because these specifically are all adults, I feel like I have to say it because I know I have this power as a developer, and I really don't want to cause some witch hunt.
For sure. I definitely appreciate that. Sin always sent me the "you in defense of me" posts, so it just took a bit. We had to catch up. There was a little bit of buffering.
Okay. But not to get too philosophical, I believe that Plato said that speech is a bad form of the mind, and the mind is a bad form of the idea world where everything is pure. You can apply that to the game of telephone. Like for every step you take in something, the information will become distorted. I don't like Plato in everything. I don't like him in most things, actually. But I think that one is a wisdom that you can apply, that for every step in the telephone, information will have been distorted.
Fair. But I guess moving from one super opinionated topic to another, Star Stable is a game that targets itself towards young girls. But at the same time, it has a very interesting relationship with feminism, particularly with how it handles its gender lock. I don't want to get super in depth on this topic because I'm sure it'll get all kinds of opinionated, and I don't want to ruin it on a very politically charged kind of idea. But what is your opinion on the approach to femininity that Star Stable has, and the opinion on offering maybe not male character models, but at the very least to allow people to maybe choose their pronoun?
So now I have to be careful about exactly how I put this, so I don't burn too many bridges back at the company if they listen. No, I don't think that's a problem. I can say that me and Ylva were just discussing this last week after our weekly D&D game, as it happens to be.
Very nice.
And we were both talking about changing the player model is something that is an ongoing process. But we know also that is going to take a long time, and we're not even 100% sure of what we're going to do with it yet. And just to start it off there, we can say that, in my opinion, you should definitely be able to choose a player model that is not necessarily obviously female presenting in the game. If we just include options like some females don't have breasts, or they don't have big breasts that are visible, or they do have short hair, or any other number of features that I think a new player model would be able to reflect. But something like changing the model itself is still a far bit away. So we had an interesting discussion on what would be possible smaller things we could do before then. And I think something like at least introducing shorter hairstyles and giving more option in the way of clothes would be a good start towards that.
For sure.
Because even without approaching this topic too much, I think we should be able to say that you should, regardless of who you are, you should be able to present yourself correctly within Star Stable, I think. And we've added a few items to that effect. Like we did add a fake beard, we added a suit at the funeral, and we've added a few items like that. But it's at least on my part personally, I try to employ gender-neutral pronouns about the player when I write. That is not necessarily an official company statement. That is just something that I have generally seen that takes me no effort at all, but to certain people it can mean a lot.
For sure. And there's definitely.
And I think it's important to do that, because it takes literally zero more effort for me to write like that.
And I think,
of course, I don't write 100% of game's text. I have made some modest writing contributions to the game, but I am not mainly a game writer, but a game designer. And even though I love writing, I do it a lot in my free time. And the creative director is always encouraging me when I want to do it, but it's also that I am a game designer by trade, and it is something I want to focus on. Even if I love the story, I love our characters, and I want to contribute into that. And the fact that I care personally, I care a lot about equality. Sounds wrong.
Yeah,
but that is the sentiment. I'm really happy that the narrative has really been on our side in this manner, that we have been able to put a more diverse cast than before into the game. But as I would really love us to put more of this into the front, because if we really want to prove ourselves to be a kind of 2020 company that keeps looking forward and takes social issues seriously, we need to be able to show that and take a stand. And I think this might also have need a decision on a much higher level in the company on what company we want to be and what we want to stand for, which is obviously a very complex issue that I can't really speak for anyone on this matter. But I'm hoping that we can do more smaller things moving on. We've definitely introduced more male side characters that are intended to have agencies and more character of their own, and more characters in general that represents a wider variety of people. And I think the important thing here is also that those characters don't any longer sit around and wait for the player to come solve their problems. Rather, all of these should be people that the player feel like we can go adventure together.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Having dynamic 3D characters is probably the best way to show egalitarianism in having interesting, dynamic, and nuanced characters in not just their personalities, but in where they're from and how they present and everything in that.
Definitely, just as a piece of trivia, I have to say that cat content is not canon.
Mm-hmm.
But when we released Linda's Room for the Light Ride quest, for those of you who have played it, otherwise I guess spoiler.
Spoiler tag up. Spoilers for the Light Ride.
Spoilers for the Light Ride quest. Oh. But when you go to Linda's Room, we originally intended to have a little statue of Ganesha on her desk.
Oh.
Because that is something we have presented Linda. She's Pakistani. We know that her family moved to Jorvik a while ago. Mm-hmm. And she made a comment in some of the quests that her parents believe in reincarnation. But we haven't officially presented Linda as a Hindu character. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of sad that part got cut.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting in the implications of religion versus what the story presents as, like, Adine is the god.
Yeah, it definitely represents some questions.
Yeah, but at the same time,
godly beings.
We can always go the route of the Lucky Six, and like there are all the gods. So spoiler for the Lucky Six. With that said,
we're just throwing all the spoilers on here.
All right, spoiler tag down. With that said, moving again from one complicated topic to another, and the next kind of topic I wanted to talk about was financial stuff, and I want to preface this with, I think everyone at Star Stable deserves to be paid well. You provide a luxury good, as all arts are, and so this is not I think Star Stable should cut their prices in order to give me a cheaper price as a consumer or anything like that. And at the same time, I also understand that game prices as an industry have not increased despite inflation since the 90s, roughly.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about mm-hmm. it. Like, just look at what an ice cream costed a few years ago to what it costs now, and inflation is everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And particularly with as much money as the gaming industry brings in, the idea of that not increasing is crazy. I think it does come back to the idea of people need art, and minimum wage, particularly in the States, not increasing has a lot of impact on that. And it sucks that the U.S. sets the standard because our quality of living is less than fantastic, and our treatment of employees versus corporations kind of thing, although that's an entire topic that is probably way too political to get you into.
And I feel like I'm not qualified to comment on that anyway, especially from from Sweden, who is like US as far away from the US you can get in that, I guess.
Yeah, in most ways, yeah. So that's kind of the preface I want to go into this topic. At the same time, I am a consumer, and I can look at other games and see what they do. And Star Stable, as an indie game, charges about 200% more on their microtransactions than not only other indie games but AAA games, and that seems like an incredibly significant disparity in the price gap, particularly when indie games usually charge less because they're making up for the fact that they don't have the funding of a AAA publisher or something like that. And I understand Star Stable has recently got a publisher. They're the folks who are behind Just Cause, is one of Star Stable's investors now. I believe. But they're still, by and large, y'all are an indie team. This is not y'all aren't supported by Blizzard or AC Soft or anything like that, or NC Soft.
Yeah, and hopefully we will never be bought out by Activision.
Yeah, hopefully.
That didn't work out for Blizzard. Oh, I should not be booting other game companies and Shillings. Ignore that.
So I guess why does Star Stable price itself so much higher than its competition?
So there are a few things that are kind of unique when it comes to Star Stable's pricing. And not just looking at it being the upfront money, looking like it's a very high investment upfront. But when you pay, we offer the option to buy the game permanently. And then you get the game and you get every weekly update forever right now. And this is a kind of unusual strategy when it comes to MMOs, because most MMOs either offer a subscription service or they are free to play with optional subscriptions and many microtransactions in between them. I have to tiptoe around a bit exactly economy-wise, because this is heavily NDR'd. But generally, the option to pay once and then you get all the updates forever, you get all the expansions, compared to something like Elder Scrolls Online, where you can buy the base game. You get, that's about a normal price for a game, a little bit cheaper than Star Stable. You get the full game, you get access to the base game and everything that's in there. But you have to pay for each expansion that comes out, which I guess would roughly equate to a new area in Star Stable. I'd say not quite, because Elder Scrolls Online is driven by a much bigger investor, as you mentioned before.
Closest approximate would be expansion packs, is a map expansion for Star Stable.
Yeah, and then you still have to buy each expansion or take their optional subscription service where you pay and then you get access to the expansion as long as you pay for it. Or there are some older MMOs that had a model of a subscription only, and you still have to pay to buy the expansions. But I think only World of Warcraft is allowed to do that anymore because it's World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft,
It gets away with things like that because they started... well, they didn't start it, but they codified the MMO craze. I'm sorry, EverQuest and online players, but it really popularized the MMO, and most MMOs were based on that. But because pay once might look expensive up front, but it's an amazing deal to the players.
For sure.
And that really has caused a strange effect of us getting very little revenue from subscriptions. And instead, we need to rely on horse sales to bring in more constant money. When you buy the pay one subscription, you're to a weekly allowance of 100 star coins. So you can actually, in theory, buy every game by not playing the game, which is weird. That's definitely weird that the star coins don't even have to log in and claim them. You just get them. So if you don't play the game for 8 weeks, you can log in and buy a new horse. You benefited for not playing the game, which is... but to go back to the pricing. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just making a comment on not logging on, you get rewarded,
But also the fact that you don't have to claim these things, and that the weekly updates are also things that just aren't advertised in the game. I feel like none of these things are really shown a great value, because when you buy the optional subscription in Elder Scrolls, they're very careful to show exactly how much value you get up front in these things. So I think that when you consider the price tags, these things like the constant and all the free updates, they're quite easy to miss. But then we can talk about the horses and the Starcoin packages. First off, here is probably the point where I should make a common question we get is why certain Starcoin packages cost have different prices in different places. And that is mainly because we have based the sales economy to the general economy of that nation.
Yeah.
Which is why it can be somewhat cheaper to play in Eastern Europe, but that's only relative to an income economy that is not based out from there.
Mm-hmm.
The average percentage you pay would be the same. Mm-hmm. But with that out of the way, Starcoin packages look very expensive up front. Mm-hmm. There's no going around that. Mm-hmm. And a horse is generally, I guess 800 Starcoins would be a fair average to say, because they're either, all the modern horses we release are either 750 or 950. Mm-hmm. But most of them are definitely 750 or 850, so 800 is a fair average because I don't want to do the math. Right.
Fair.
And if you just look at the closest Starcoin package to 800 Starcoins, mm-hmm. Then that of course is an outrageously high price for just a mount, right?
Yeah.
Just for argument, can we look up the exact number? Or no, we can't because it's different in every place. I just said this.
I think it's about 25 in USD.
Yeah, and that's for what, like 1,000 Starcoins?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that seems like amount is going to be about 22, 23 USD. Mm-hmm. And that is, of course, an outrageous price. Mm-hmm. But we have to consider that Starcoins are only worth the value of what people are willing to pay for them.
Yeah.
And you get more value for your Starcoins if you buy one of the packages that contains a higher amount of Starcoins. Mm-hmm. And Star Stable also tends to run a lot of double Starcoin weekends, mm-hmm. which means that essentially every Starcoin this pack will be at half of the value of the base pack.
Yeah.
This is some more complex economy stuff, so I really shouldn't get into it because it will probably bore a lot of the younger viewers. But the end result is really that our most sold Starcoin packages tend to be the biggest one during double Starcoins.
Yeah.
Which, when you divide that by the value of the horse, it becomes at least less than $20 for a horse.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what it feels like for the consumer.
Yeah.
And that is a big touching point, I think, because when you make a buy that feels like a terrible deal, mm-hmm. you're not going to be encouraged to buy more. Mm-hmm. And if the company is actually not making as much money on this deal as it looks like it does to the consumer, mm-hmm. then it's clearly a terrible deal for both.
Yeah. I think the point that I would want to come back to is that, at least to me, and I've tutored a lot of kids, I've babysat a lot of kids, I'm a teacher for my full-time profession at the moment, and I've talked to plenty of kids, plenty of parents who I know the kids would love Star Stable. And I personally will agree that the price for lifetime is absolutely fair for not ever having to buy expansions. I don't have an issue with membership personally. Even if it is a higher price, I think it's absolutely fair. The thing for me, though, about horses is that it's roughly $25, $30, depending on the pack you get, at least in the States. And arguably, while you could infinitely have a horse, for current active engaging content with that horse is really just training it. And so that's 4 or 5 days of content for $25 versus arguably a savvy gamer parent would be like, well, I could buy Stardew Valley for that amount of money. I could buy some indie game about horses for arguably that amount of money. And my kid
No, sorry.
Oh, and arguably that kid might get more entertainment or more amount of time playing that indie game than they would playing Star Stable with that one horse.
Yeah, I think a savvy gamer parents might do just that. I don't see any reason why indie gamer parent wouldn't buy Stardew Valley. Mm-hmm. It's okay to play more than one game, of course. And I think you're right that the horses don't currently provide as much value as they should. And but that I think is a big problem that we will somehow need to solve on the engagement side. We talked a bit earlier about every horse you purchase should really be a journey.
Yeah.
If that really is the price, whether it actually is or if it just feels that way, is the price of a game like Stardew Valley, which is a great game in my opinion. I think a horse should at least provide a journey that feels as unique and surprising and delightful as spending that money on another game.
And so like this is less so. It's just that like with parents I've actually talked to, that price point being so out of line from industry standards feels like it's a turnoff.
But I think we can discuss the question in itself. Like, does players feel like they need to leave the game because it's priced, or do players make the decision to not buy Star Stable because it seems so expensive? Because again, even if something like Lifetime is great value provided compared to another MMO, to a parent who looks at it and sees that Lifetime is maybe $70 or something.
Yeah, it's 75 USD.
Yeah, that is a lot more expensive than most other games in the market. And while I don't think we have any current plans to change that, this is not for me to say either, because I cannot affect pricing outside of the game. But yeah, it's I can see how that those price points could definitely be a turnoff. I don't think I have any good answers to this.
No, and this is the one I want to talk on it more, not because I wanted necessarily to get answers out of you, because I know that's all NDA and it's out of your department, but it's more so I want it to be a conversation with the devs, and I want to know that it's something you're thinking about, which clearly is something you've indicated that you all are thinking about this, because I know it's a concern in the community.
I think it's also something that I can say is kind of out game devs themselves. Because, pricing in the game concerning Jorvik, Shilling, and Star Coins are set by the devs.
Yeah.
Pricing outside of the game is completely independent of what we do.
Yeah. I mean more like as it's something on the mind of your whole team. I guess you shouldn't use dev interchangeably with game team member. But it's less so that I think, to me, I feel more relieved knowing that this is something on your mind and it is something actively being looked at, and like either trying to introduce more value to it or to look at the prices and see why it isn't working, because I want Star Stable to make money, and I want it to succeed, but everything that I have access to indicates that it's hurting the game, and I don't want that. And so I just want, more so in asking the questions, more so I want to know that obviously the team is looking at it, but also that it's something that is being actively considered, and it's not just like, I think the comment you made earlier that you don't want people buying multiple accounts.
Yeah, exactly. It ties into that quite well.
Because I know a lot of people feel like, because of how it's currently set up, that Star Stable is a little exploitative, and I would not make that argument, but I can see how particularly younger people who don't have ready income, and even adults who don't have ready income, can feel that way, because it's more expensive than its competition, and particularly with more MMOs more in line with Star Stable's competition coming out, like Tim is coming out for PC and it's only 35 USD. Sky, Children of the Light, is indie by the people who did Journey, and it's completely free with membership, but it's still arguably cheaper than getting into Star Stable. There's the Book of Travels is coming out, and Alicia is getting further along in development. And it's not this that I want those games to do better than Star Stable. It's just that looking at the competition and their points of entry, it's like, well, how is Star Stable competing with that field?
I mean, in one way, I would kind of want those games to be better than Star Stable, because that just means we have reason to make sure that we're even better.
Mm-hmm.
the actual positive side of competition that doesn't tend to pop up as often as a lot of people likes to argue that it will. But healthy competition should mean that everyone have to be the best that they are for the consumers. And I think that what you said, we're definitely looking to provide more value for both the game itself and the horse purchases. And that is something that we in the studio team, the people who are working on the game, are definitely looking to do. Currently, a lot of the engagement in Star Stable stems from doing quests and following the story or training your horse. And once you're out of the quests and don't have any horses to train, all the engagement in the game is just waiting until you can buy a new horse. And we are going to work a lot more on making sure that there will always be activities that you can do in the game when you log in, even outside the Wednesday updates, which is because we have been relying so much on these Wednesday updates for several years, and it has been a big selling argument. I'm sure it looks great, but we really need to make the game exciting every day. You should come into the game and be able to be an equestrian or be a soul rider, live in a world of magic, hang out with your favorite NPCs, go on adventures and fight Darkcore every day without having to wait for the next story quest to drop. So engagement-wise, to add more value, that is definitely something we would be looking to do. And that would also hopefully lessen the feeling of having to buy the game again. Wish to get more value from it. Hopefully there might even be at some point an idea to how we can get people to replay quests in an efficient way, but we have no real ways of doing that right now. And hopefully buying horses will the whole journey of training a horse from 1 to 15 will feel like it's providing the same level of engagement. All of those other games that you mentioned, they're coming out. They're great. I haven't had time to check out all of them yet, but I'm very curious about Temtem. I'm a big fan of Pokemon. And it seems like, hey, maybe this game is doing what Nintendo should have done a long time ago.
I have played it a little. It is definitely still early beta, but it's pretty good. And it definitely makes me... One of the reasons why this conversation came back up for me about particularly... Like, they haven't released their microtransaction system yet, but just the price being half of Star Stables was the thing that made me think of this topic wanting to come up again.
Yeah, and it's always difficult for me to speak on pricing, particularly outside of the game. But I think I for sure can say that we do add more value to what you're getting when you're buying the game. Maybe this is getting a bit anecdotal, but if I'm thinking back to when I was younger, when I was a teen or a preteen and playing games, I definitely would be. You're definitely always in that situation where you don't make your own money, you don't have much of a disposable income. It's really difficult to spend that on games, and in most cases, it really comes down to convince your parents to buy this thing for you, which is of course difficult if the parents take one look at it and say that it's overpriced.
Yeah.
But it's something I sadly can't give a good solution to.
Fair. That is absolutely fair. But you have answered more than I was expecting on this topic, so thank you very much for that.
I think I answered more than I was expecting. But I think I didn't. I don't think it's out of line on this one. I've been discussing this with the team, and I don't think bringing these things up is something that we are averse to telling people.
Right. Well, I definitely don't want to get you in trouble, so let me know. But talking about the future of Star Stable and that value you're wanting to bring to the game, let's move back, I guess, more into your realm. of future game design and some things that potentially could be in the game in the future. One of the things I wanted to mention to start off with is that currently Star Stable for 2 years now has not done a map expansion because you all are updating the entire map to the most recent art direction you want to go in. What is the benefit that we're not seeing as players? What's going on behind the scenes that make this whole conversion easier for you and the development moving forward?
Well, we want to make the game a lot better to future-proof it. I mentioned a bit earlier how the starting area's onboarding experience is currently not satisfactory. Mm-hmm. The best experience in the game is not condensed within the starting area, as it generally should in a good game tutorial. Mm-hmm. You should see this is the best thing the game has to offer within the first 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Well, that is not something we've gotten started on yet. But, that's mainly because when we are looking to rebuild a lot of the bases in the game, currently most of what you've seen in the player base is the graphical updates to areas. Mm-hmm. We're smoothing out the level design, removing a lot of mysterious fences that didn't come up anywhere, trying to add some more idea of environmental storytelling to the game. Mm-hmm. But we're also looking behind the scenes to update a lot of the base systems that really drive the player throughout the game. Mm-hmm. What should be the motivation? What should be how do we give agency to the player to empower themselves when it comes to exploration, for instance? I've always been a fan of the idea that you see that mountain over there? Yeah, you can go there. Or you see that tower? Yeah, don't you want to explore it? Mm-hmm. And those are hopefully things that will go into the game more in the future. That we can minimize negative possibility space, reward the pillars of the game, such as exploration, caring for your horse, and competing. Mm-hmm. And reconstruct systems that aren't really providing a satisfactory experience right now. But again, restructuring system takes a lot of time, even more than rebuilding the graphics of an area. But a lot of the benefits, I think, will be to that we want to make sure that the areas we have feel more alive. Mm-hmm. Rather than spending too much time adding empty areas where you maybe have one quest chain and a few races, but then it just feels completely empty and it's like an abandoned ghost town.
Mm-hmm. I guess with that said, map expansions are still the expansions for Star Stable, or the closest equivalent. So there is still a large appeal to more world to explore. And so after now, we'll be going into 2 years without map expansions. Could you loosely approximate when that kind of content might return? Because it is a big pull for the community.
Well, I think that I can't give any estimate for when we will start doing area expansions again. Mm-hmm. Because we definitely want to make sure to focus on giving the game that exists right now being a good gameplay experience and make sure that it feels alive. We've done some mini expansions that haven't really been new areas, but have been some mini places to explore where you could do some kind of instanced playing around, such as Pandoria and Galloper's Keep and Winter Village. Mm-hmm. And we might do some more and Cloud Kingdom. Yeah. But we might look to expand a bit on those places as well. Okay. But for now, I can't give a plan on whenever the northern part of Mistfall or the Ashlands or any of those places could potentially be released.
Going on to the idea of developing core positive gameplay loops in game, I know that the Yule Goats and the Pumpkins are still new, but is that system being developed to add some kind of random event system like what you see in Guild Wars 2 or in Final Fantasy 14 or in ESO? Why can't I ever think of MMOs when I need them? Is there any kind of system for more active, dynamic kind of events going on around the world?
Of those games mentioned, ESO is definitely the one I've played the most. I've only played a bit of FF14 for research, and I only played Guild Wars 2 a long time ago, a little bit. So my frame of reference isn't great.
They all generally work the same way. Be in an area, do an activity at random times.
Yeah, generally there's like mini quests, or ESO has those random boss fights that are hidden around the map as well. Yeah. And they generally those events kind of nicely fit in with gameplay that is something to do that you can just find while traversing the map. And I'm hoping that we've obviously done some experimentation with the pumpkins and the Yule goats, and we're probably looking into adding more of those events to the map. Okay. And maybe even looking into doing some more kinds of hidden events that would encourage exploration gameplay.
Oh, that sounds exciting. That would be awesome.
I can't say anything for sure, but we're definitely going to expand on a system that we used for the goat pumpkin chase in the future and make it more of a permanent addition. But of course, all the data, both metrics and player opinion that we've collected from those events is going to be really valuable in understanding how we should set those up.
I am happy to keep providing feedback for those because I enjoyed them both for different reasons for each of them. I definitely think obviously there's balance, but I'm very excited to see where that goes. I guess obligatory would be, well, what's happening next? But I know you cannot answer that. So just as someone who's been playing this game for a while and as someone who is familiar with the lore and all, I want to ask some things that you would like to see in the future. Not that they will, but just things that you would be interested in seeing as a direction moving forward. Is there a particular story arc you would like to see moving forward? Or I guess we'll start there. I don't want to bombard you with what ifs.
No, that's still a big question because there's a lot of stories I think we have to tell.
Yeah,
Jorvik, and I'm excited to work on a lot of them. We have so many characters, and it's time to really take all of these characters and develop them more. Yeah, I of course, as you know, tell exactly, but what's going to happen next. But I can always speculate around some of my headcanons and wishes past, or give some extremely cryptic hints, like you'll be hunting down the great Jorvigian Arapath. But the story quests are definitely going to continue moving forward. That doesn't say much, but I would like us to be able to grow a bit closer to the Soul Riders and outside of the story quests. Because that comes back a bit to being able to live in Jorvik every day. Yeah. And while I think, there's a lot of value in telling the story, I think there would also be a lot of value in getting to know the characters of Jorvik outside of those quests. In a way that maybe the players could interact, and hopefully that wouldn't be limited to just the Soul Riders, but to many of the major characters that inhabit Jorvik. I would love to see some sort of to build some sort of friendship system instead of what you have in games like Stardew Valley or the BioWare games, that you can actually do some events and activities daily with some of the NPCs, or give them gifts, and then you get more information about them, or cutscenes, and maybe other gifts back. It would be super fun, I think, if you could befriend a character and you get a bit of their cosplay, like we did with James in the token quest. So you can actually cosplay as those characters.
That would be super cool.
And also expanding on things like we've been spoiler again, Linda's room. And being able to build that out for other characters, getting to visit Alex, Lisa, and Anne, where they live. And being able to find out more of those characters in that way. And again, even characters that are popular, but not the soul riders. I am definitely referring to a kind of tall magician man popular in the community.
He's got a bit of a fan community there, yeah.
Yeah, and also important doesn't regularly get as much spotlight, but we consider important, like Avalon or James or Rania or the Jorvik Rangers in particular. Being able to do something to get to know them. I think building onto that, getting to know the characters in a fashion outside the quest would be something I would love to add. And writing little character moments is always fun.
For sure. If based on, we'll just with the CD-ROM games for now. Is there a place in Jorvik that you are most looking forward to going to?
Well, do you mean I don't really have that emotional attachment to the CD-ROM games in particular, which makes it a bit more difficult to answer because I only played them for research after I started at this job.
Fair.
But I can say that there are some places as described in the second novel. And one of them exists in the CD-ROM game, and I can say Pine Hill Manor is a place I'm looking forward to see. And also remaking Pie's Swamp in the way that it's presented in the second novel to be not so much a balancing game, but a truly scary and magical place. No big spoilers for the second book here, but yeah, both of those areas exist in that book, I guess. Maybe I should have a spoiler warning there as well.
Spoiler warning for anyone who wants to go in blind, but now I really want the second book, so.
Yeah, I just have to learn Swedish. No,
get on it.
I think Pine Hill Manor is also one of those areas that we might be able to expand on without making it a huge expansion, because we could definitely introduce a way to travel there, and maybe you'd be just behind the gates, so you can't go there in the world, but you can go in and explore the manor. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And just a little instance map where you're gonna go poke in on Mr. Sands. Oh, that'd be creepy. Oh.
Yeah, that could be like maybe like a dungeon in some other game, allowing you to fight enemies. Maybe some sort of combined stealth escape gameplay.
There you go. That would be really cool. Yeah, like little mini dungeon quests. And I mean, you have Dark Core to do that there too. Doing it with friends, that would introduce a lot of really cool puzzles too.
Yeah.
One friend to hold down the button while you run through and turn off the camera. Oh, that'd be cool. Right.
That could be really cool. You'd basically together. You have someone who sneaks into the camera, tells you when it's safe.
Oh, that'd be. I mean, with current chat, we'd see, but at least with a lot of Discord communities popping up, maybe.
Well, we would probably have to include chats in the case of those multiplayer activities. Maybe you could ping areas or something in addition to the chat.
There you go. Next topic, and this is one I am not super familiar on, but is there a particular horse breed that you are interested in seeing coming to Jorvik, or a breed that exists that you're excited to see updated?
I'm sure a lot of people will be surprised to hear me say this, as I am a designer, but I'm not a horse girl. I'm not an equestrian. I mean, I like horses fine, but I never had the same emotional attachment that I feel with cats or dogs. Even as a little girl, sure, I watched like My Little Pony, and I always think horses in shows were cool, but I never rode as a kid more than like pony rides in the park. And as an adult, I'm not. Horses are not one of my greater interests. That being said, I have been introduced to a lot of horses throughout the game. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are way more knowledgeable than me when it comes to horses, working on those relevant parts of the game. So my lack of knowledge doesn't necessarily harm the game because I am not the one who's making the horses.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, I've always had a soft spot for the halflinger horse.
Aww.
Mainly because I actually worked a bit with that one in that they needed someone to write texts on it, and I did a bunch of research just because I was new back then, and I took my job very seriously, and like only a tenth of what I actually wrote made it into the game. But the halflinger kind of became my signature horse, and I guess seeing that one updated would be something. But it's a Generation 2 horse, and I still think it looks rather good, so that's probably gonna take a while.
Might be a bit, but that one's a cute pony. I like it. All right, moving in, I want to talk about and pick your brain on some systems that a lot of MMOs have, and I guess your just quick takes on what you would like to see it as in Star Stable. So the first one being crafting. We've talked about it a couple of times. What would your ideal Star Stable crafting system look like?
I like crafting systems a lot in many games. There are games that do it better than others, of course. But I think that in a game like Star Stable, which is mainly not based around combat, but rather around exploration and questing, basically you're running chores for a lot of NPCs. I think a crafting system, if done well, would be incredibly useful for Star Stable, particularly because a crafting system allows us to give more agency to a player in what they want to pursue and craft. Like if there are crafting trees, you can look at, I really want that, then I need all of these items, and I get these items by crafting it by combining these items, and you can use that for either this hat or that shirt, or it can make a player make a lot of interesting decisions. And you can also introduce a lot of ways where you can obtain this crafting material. Like daily quests, maybe you get some by fishing, maybe you can get some by doing archaeology, and we're back to that discussion where you have to choose if you want to sell them for Jorvik Shilling, donate them to the museum, or keep them for crafting material. I think there is this game called, what is it called?
What's it about? I might be able to help.
It's a little cute game where it's basically a Zelda game without combat.
Is it Yonder?
Yonder, the Cloud Catching Chronicle.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, there is this game called Yonder, which actually surprised me when I played it, because it took me a while to understand that, hey, there's actually no combat in this game. I'd played it for a while before I'd realized, and I was just rounding around and crafting things, doing fetch quests, collecting hidden objects and cats that made meowing noises. I might have made something in Star Stable that was inspired by that part. I think both the crafting and collecting really well in the game, and that really makes me want to see something like that in Star Stable, because it can work together with a lot of our systems. And it can offset the reward economy in that instead of just being slowly rewarded with Jorvik Shillings that you can buy only certain things for, you can be rewarded with as well with crafting materials where you can decide what to spend them on. And I think that choice is very interesting. But of course, a crafting system also has to be done well.
Yeah.
A lot of poring over Excel sheets, but I like that kind of work. So for me, that would be super fun to make.
I'm very interested in Animal Crossing New Horizons and what that might mean for your research on casual crafting games, because I think the system was very interesting.
I am so happy they're adding crafting. It's like they things they've experimented with in spin-off Animal Crossing games and added it to this one and added even more things. And if you saw the latest Nintendo Direct, I can only say we shouldn't talk about Animal but I'm so super excited about that. There's the crafting, there's the terraforming. And yeah, I'm definitely going to keep an eye on the crafting system in Animal Crossing, because a crafting system is something I really want to pitch to our director, because I think such a system could have a solid place within Star Stable's game.
For sure. And going off something that builds on crafting, and also that Animal Crossing has, a housing system was teased a while ago. What would you want housing to look like for Star Stable?
Yes, we might all remember the of the sofa and the barrel of crayfish. And some other item, I think.
You got a bucket of paint.
A bucket of paint, yes. That were made for a system that was never completed for various reasons. I can't really go into that, but there's a good reason why you never should put stuff in the game for a system which is not even done yet. I think they have since been removed from those quests and replaced, or no, I think you just get Shillings, you just don't get the sofa now. But the people who have it in their wardrobes still have it, I guess. But to actually talk about a housing system, I think that would be a really fun way to also maybe make Jorvik Shillings useful. Because if upgrading your house is a way to spend a lot of Jorvik Shillings, then it suddenly makes sense to also expand the limit of how much you can have. And if the system would work well, you should be able to choose a lot of different ways to live. Like you could have an apartment in Jorvik City, a druid villa somewhere in Valedale, maybe some nice place close to Linda in Jarlaheim.
A boathouse in Golden.
Yeah, and whichever house you choose should probably have a nice view of the environment. And then probably allow you with options such as upgrading the house and furnish it, repaint it. And then hopefully this would be a fun thing to add to the stable as well. Especially if you could make it in a way so now this would be, what I'm saying right now would be incredibly difficult to because it would involve taking something away from the players. But imagine that you didn't have a stable to start with. Instead, you just have a grassy lawn where your horses are walking around. And there you can start building your stable however you want. And you can keep expanding it, you can add items to it, you can design it, and you will still have this grassy area where your horses can walk free, which I know is very requested. And if you could even, when you move your home stable, that should also be affected by the environment, even if it's an instanced place. If you have it in Golden Hills, it should reflect that area. This is also something that I know we definitely want to do, not the very least because we teased it several years back when we thought that we were getting close to finishing it, and then the project was just put on ice. But I can't say when, but it is a venue we will try to pursue in the future, I am pretty sure.
And I don't want to put your economist through the paces, but what are the thoughts on trading and adding a trading system into the game? Because I know horse breeding is a big issue too, and I will lump breeding in with trading because I imagine that'll become, it's similar players trading money kind of debate. But what would I don't want to say what would your ideal trading system be because that is too complicated. But what are your thoughts on that kind of system being added to Star Stable?
I think we could split this topic into two different ones if it's breeding. Breeding as an activity, sure, it's a bit questionable when it's aimed towards kids, but I don't think you need to imply anything else than that, oh, you want to breed 2 horses, choose which 2 horses you want to breed, fade to black, a foal was born.
A foal was born, yeah.
There's so I don't feel like that. So some might feel it is. The big issue is, of course, would this allow you to generate? We don't want players to get horses for free by breeding.
Mhm.
But if people would like breeding as a mechanic, and maybe as a way to unlock special coats that horses wouldn't be able to have normally,
Mhm.
maybe it could be that you just need to purchase a specific item
Mhm.
for star coins that allows you to breed two horses with each other,
Like
and that will give you a foal that you raise.
So like a miracle medicine from Animal Crossing or a story season.
Something like that. You have the Final Fantasy VII had a chocobo breeding where you fed them Giselle greens or something, and they would have a chocobo offspring.
There you go.
But of course, that's a single player game, so economics would be different. But I know there are some. I think Horse, the web-based, browser-based horse game, which is mainly menu-based. I think that has that you use premium currency to be allowed to breed your horses. And you can actually breed with other players' horses as well.
I think you can pay with the in-game currency as well, but it's a larger amount.
But I think something like that would... I don't see it as that we might do breeding at some point. It's not something that is under consideration, but I feel like the hurdles aren't insurmountable.
Yeah.
Now, trading, we did talk a bit about before, and my feelings on that is really that until we have something that feels worthwhile to trade, I don't think it's worth spending the time to create a trading system. Of course, with crafting, that might change.
Yeah.
And of course, it needs to be very carefully tuned so that players don't have the ability to generate so much of something that it becomes an inflation that's completely out of our control.
For sure.
Because right now we control everything that goes in and out of the game. But if it was possible to say, suddenly maybe a pair of players discover that a pair of black jeans is the absolute best currency to trade with each other for some reason, and they're able to break the game's economy. There are some interesting write-ups on how players have busted some MMOs by trading that I'm sure we could find. But I think the main problem right now is that there aren't that many interesting items to trade.
That's fair. Are there any other systems that you would want to see that we haven't already talked about implemented in Star Stable that you think would add a positive gameplay loop?
I think I mentioned my two biggest in different topics, but crafting system and friendship system are definitely my two big favorites. Friendship system being able was what I talked about, being able to talk to, do daily activities, and befriend NPCs in a manner outside of quests. Besides those two, we have also talked about this earlier, but I'd really like to see a rework of the basic carrying system. Because I think in a game that involves taking care of horses, the very feeling of caring for another living creature is a powerful experience. And that is something we could probably enhance a lot more. I think that might go into something that I know is very popular and that players would probably like to see is more content on the rescue ranch.
Yes, definitely.
A lot of players loved it, but it was only like a 5-day quest or a week.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
Making that into more of a system where you could constantly be allowed to care for different horses. Maybe identifying different ailments and figuring out ways to cure them. Maybe even combining that with a crafting system because you need to gather things to make medicine.
There you go.
I think that could be an interesting thing that could also speak to the caring part of the gameplay.
And I know the crafting system has been popular with the flower crowns. That has been very much enjoyed. So I definitely I hope to see it. And I hope you guys get the time to develop it, because that would be like getting to get on and decorate my little cottage with my horses like every day. I'd be getting on every day to do that. I mean, as best I could.
Yeah, we know how powerful that feeling is in any game like
Mhm.
Sims, just going around and decorate your cottage with items that you made yourself and have your horse there and ride around in a beautiful world with a horse. And yeah,
Mhm.
I have high hopes for the future, but it's one step at a time.
Yeah.
And again, I can't promise that any of these will get done anytime soon.
Mhm.
But I have hopes that many more cool things will come to the game.
For sure. And to wrap this up, because this is something I've told you I'm going to make a big deal about because it's a big deal to me. Star Stable currently releases content weekly, which is amazing, and we talked about how that is one of the unsung values of Lifetime. And I absolutely don't want to devalue that with this suggestion. But I know that the weekly release cycle can hurt the development of other features, chiefly because it causes a type of crunch. It has very rapid turnaround rates, and we've seen now actively with Ilva from the community team. I don't know what other team she's on, but her talking about having to end Star Stable News because it was hurting her health. There seems to be a very active impact to this development cycle, to the kind of content that gets out weekly, and to the developers. That seems like that kind of release schedule hurts them. What is the impact on? And I know Star Stable is split in at least two teams between the Horse and World teams, but what does that development cycle look like on your end in terms of like crunch and stress?
Horse and World team are some of the teams that are working on the game itself, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people who also work with the game who don't work directly on people who update the news pages and such. Mm-hmm. And they also have to adapt to that development schedule, of course. Mm-hmm. But yeah, weekly updates is something that is a great selling point for the game because it sounds really good. Mm-hmm. But the question is if it's as good in practice when you can't always focus on the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's partly an issue that might not be able to be solved by not updating weekly because we would need to really change the frame of mind in how we release updates. We can't just say that we will no longer be updating weekly, but instead we make all those weekly updates anyway and just the monthly. That wouldn't make any kind of change. Yeah. Rather, we have to change the way we think of updates entirely. Mm-hmm. And that is going to take a lot more planning. Mm-hmm. But currently, yeah, it is sometimes difficult to get a release every single week. And I still find it kind of incredible. Star Stable has actually managed to do this without missing any weekly updates for 8 years. Mm-hmm. But it's also a double-edged sword in that we are relying so much on these weekly updates that outside the Wednesday updates, there aren't as much content to check out if you're a player who has played through all the quests. Mm-hmm. And that is really a problem we have before we can stop relying on weekly updates. Fair. It is a discussion that we are having internally. I can't say much more on that. Mm-hmm. But, and I don't know what the results are going to be. But I think we need to have some of those systems that we talked about earlier that would allow the players to have content outside the regular updates. Mm-hmm. Would be a necessity to not drive the game weekly again. If you can log in on any Saturday and feel like you're getting great value for what you're doing, and you only really expect an update now and then, mm-hmm. Then it wouldn't be as big of a deal.
What would, if Star Stable Switch, and this is implying that you guys had done all the prep work to lay the groundwork for this, if Star Stable, if your teams all switched to monthly or even quarterly updates, what would that look like overall for the amount of content that would be able to be released in that kind of bigger bundle compared to the weekly updates?
It really depends. As I mentioned before, we want to avoid a situation where release the content we would have made weekly in one big bundle anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to say exactly how. But I think that if we're looking at other games, then maybe if we did a monthly or a quarterly update, or we might even have we have a small update once a month that would be comparable to the weekly updates now, and then we have one big quarterly update which might add some new way of playing the game or revamp something entirely.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that has seen success in other games that go on as a service. It might mean that every month bug fixes and smaller updates, maybe some little quests, some clothes. Horses definitely has to come into this in some way as well.
Yeah.
But then quarterly, we would hopefully be able to give a big package with something that has been worked on for a longer time. That should hopefully be adding to be a great content provider for several weeks to come, regardless of which day a player is choosing to play the game. But this is of course all speculation from my part, and some knowledge about how other companies do it. And Star Stable is not in a place currently where we are able to stop the weekly updates for a number of reasons, and we will just have to see what will come out of that.
Fair. Is there anything that the community can do to support that kind of change so that you guys have less of a crunch for getting the content out?
That is difficult to answer. I know that it has been very apparent over the past year that the community has been more and more vocal about them also expressing an interest in SSO switching to non-weekly updates, which I think is a great way for the community to support it overall. That if the community shows that they want something, it is way more likely to happen. It is always a valuable thing to express your opinion, because since things move so slowly, I know that you can easily get this feeling of what I say will not be noticed or no one will listen. But as long as people keep saying the same thing for a long enough time, it will get noticed. It's just always difficult for a big company to notice a single actor.
Yeah.
You might have to, if you want to make a cause, it's good to rally support, make a hashtag. The Zony was made from a hashtag.
Yeah.
And then just keep fighting for your cause. That's the best way the community, and this does not only go for updates, but really good advice to show that they want anything in the game. If they want, if the community really wants an ice cream hat, they should do the same thing. I'm hoping that they fight for more worthwhile causes, but it's a legit cause. Ice cream hat hashtag.
SSO ice cream hat hashtag. There we go. We'll start it.
I tried to come up with there, but yeah, I think the community should always give feedback about their current feelings in the game. They should always continue to do so. And of course, as we discussed, they should do so in a constructive manner and be nice to each other.
Would agree. I would agree on that, on all fronts. Well, with that said, those are all of the questions I have for you.
Oh, wow. We've been here a while.
We've been here for just a little bit, yeah. Thank you so much, Leila, for coming and speaking to the community. I love this direction. I love everything that Star Stable has been doing lately. And I am excited to see you all speaking more actively with your community. And I genuinely hope I can be a part of that, and helping you broadcast your thoughts and the community's thoughts to you. I think that's where we're gonna wrap it up. I have to go and do another stream now, but this one's gonna be live. So, yeah, thank you so much, and best of luck to you and everyone at Star Stable. as you guys continue to make an amazing game. And I'm genuinely really excited, and I will keep up my. I know I'm lots of praises right now, but I will keep up my constructive criticism for y'all.
Thank you so much for inviting me here and taking this on yourself. And there's been a lot of great questions and great discussions, so I really appreciate this.
Of course. Hopefully, maybe I will wait for the next 4-hour interview for maybe a little bit, but I will I'll save up some questions, and maybe we can see if we can do something like this in the future. With that said, I will let you go. I believe it is quite late, or getting later in Sweden.
It's almost 9.
Oh, well, never mind. It's not that late. I don't know how time zones work.
It's not super late. It's not super late, but yeah.
All right. Well, I will let you go, and we will, I guess, talk more later. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, and hope it won't be too much of a mess to edit together.
I feel worse for Sin. I just got to take out like empty spots. She's writing up the whole thing.
Yeah, great shout outs to Sen for her part in making all of this happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's like this would not happen without Sinners 2, both in getting Leila and I to be able to talk to each other, but also she is writing up this entire interview. Like, all right, well, for real, thank you so much. And I will, I guess, to my audience and to you as well, Leila, I will talk to you soon.